Down is this in? Thursday, 3 p.m. Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, this is Larry. Hello, hello. We begin this afternoon with breaking news in our coverage of the deadly DCA air disaster. Thanks for joining us. I'm Larry Miller.
And I'm Simone D'Alba. Officials say there were no survivors after a U.S. Army Black Hawk helicopter crashed into an American Airlines regional jet last night over the Potomac River. We are waiting for a press conference on the NTSB. Let's go ahead and listen in.
Thank you for joining us. My name is Jennifer Homendy, and I'm the chairwoman of the National Transportation Safety Board. The National Transportation Safety Board is an independent federal agency that's charged by Congress with investigating every civil aviation and serious accident and serious incident in the United States and significant events in other modes of transportation. I want to start by expressing our deepest condolences, our sympathies on behalf of the entire board for those who lost loved ones in this terrible tragedy. Our thoughts, our prayers are with you. Entire communities were affected, and we are thinking of you. With me today is Bryce Banning. Bryce is a senior aircraft accident investigator with the National Transportation Safety Board. He's also going to serve as our investigator in charge of this investigation. Also with me today is the entire board. We have Todd Inman, member Todd Inman. Todd is going to serve as the board member on scene, the spokesperson for this investigation. All of the board members will be here. We have Vice Chairman Alvin Brown, member Mike Graham, who lived in Wichita for 20 years, and we also have member Tom Chapman. The NTSB's headquarters is just a mile from here, And so we are all here because this is an all-hands on-deck event. And we're here to assure the American people that we are going to leave no stone unturned in this investigation. We are going to conduct a thorough investigation of this entire tragedy, looking at the facts. Now, with that, I want to level set. When we go to the scene, and we were here last night, we allow the responders to do their important safety mission, which in this case was search and rescue and recovery. We stand back to allow them to do their important safety mission. And so this, for us, is our first full day on scene with our entire crew coming together. We have about nearly 50 people on scene, and in addition to our resources back at headquarters in our labs and throughout the agency. So with that said, we are not going to get into specific facts in this press conference. I want to level set here. We're going to get into our investigative process. As we are able to confirm factual information, we will provide that. I do want to say this is a whole of government effort. I was able to brief, along with others, the President of the United States and the Vice President this afternoon. I want to thank them for their leadership, for their tremendous support of the NTSB, for our investigators, and for the responders that are on scene doing an important mission. I also want to thank Secretary Sean Duffy, who I was communicating with early on after we first got word of this tragedy. We've been working together throughout the day, along with his team at the DOT and within FAA. I also want to thank Secretary Pete Hegseth, who was also integral in working with us today. Chris Rocheleau, the acting administrator of the Federal Aviation Administration. We've heard from many members of Congress on both sides of the aisle, and so I will say this is a tremendous, one more time, whole of government effort. I also want to take a moment and thank the many, many responders that have been on scene. It has been an incredible effort. And I will have a full list that I will provide, that we will provide tomorrow, but I do want to thank them for all their work. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Member Inman for additional remarks.
So today is our first full day on scene. Our investigative team will be on scene as long as it takes in order to obtain all of the perishable evidence and all of the fact-finding that is needed to bring us to a conclusion of probable cause. Our mission is to understand not just what happened, but why it happened, and to recommend changes to prevent it from happening again. Since we're just beginning our investigation, we don't have a great deal of information to share right now. We will keep you informed by giving regular updates as we learn more. Our intention is to have a preliminary report within 30 days, and the final report will be issued once we've completed all of our fact-finding and investigation. Now, we will not be determining the probable cause of the accident while we are here on scene, nor will we speculate about what may have caused this accident. Today, we will be going and having an organizational meeting and establishing our parties to our investigation. We currently have the following parties that are already identified: PSA Airlines, GE Aerospace, Sikorsky, FAA, NACTA, which represents the air traffic controllers, ALPA, which represents the pilots, Army, AFA, which represents the flight attendants. The Transportation Safety Board of Canada will be an accredited representative under Annex 13 of ICAO. They will be supplemented by MHIRG as a technical advisor. They were previously known as midair. by midair, sorry. The NTSB offers this party status to those companies, government agencies, and associations that have employees, activities, or equipment involved in the accident. We offer that because they will provide technical expertise and relevant information supporting the development of the best possible factual record. Once they join this investigation, they are not permitted to release documents or talk publicly about the investigation without the consent of the NTSB. So I want to stress this. It is only the NTSB that will provide information related to this investigation, with one exception. Regarding the fatalities that occurred, that notification will be handled by the DC medical examiner. We will not be discussing fatalities or names. That will be handled by them as the proper authority. So we want to talk a little bit about our process. We will analyze the facts and determine the probable cause of the accident and then issue a report of those determinations. I also want to talk a little bit about some additional people that are here with us, and they're very important to us, and that is our family assistance group. Later today, we will be briefing the families. We normally try to do this before a media event, but in this case, they're still arriving. Our family assistance specialists are already working closely with local officials and others to help assist them in their efforts to support everyone that's affected by this accident. And let me just reiterate what the chair said. A loss of life in an aviation accident is very unusual in the United States, and our heartfelt sorrow goes out to everyone that's affected. It affects us, it affects everyone around us. There are a lot of people hurting today. We will help find out what happened. We will do it factually, and we will do it accurately. As part of this, we are going to be standing up some specific working groups. Those working groups will be operations. They will be looking at the history of the accident flight and crew members' duties for as many days before the crash as appears relevant. We'll be forming a structures group, which will be the documentation of the airframe wreckage and the accident scene, including calculation of impact angles to help determine the plane's pre-impact course and altitude. We'll have a power plants group. They will do the examination of the engines and the engine accessories. We'll have a systems group. They will study the components of the plane's hydraulic, electrical, pneumatic, and associated systems, together with the instruments and elements of the flight control system. We'll have an air traffic control group. They will do reconstruction and review of air traffic control systems provided to and including acquisition of pertinent flight track surveillance information, what you might typically think of as radar or ADSB, along with controller pilot communications. We will also have a survival factors group. They will be doing the documentation of impact, forces and injuries, community emergency planning, and all crash and fire rescue efforts. Also, due to the unique nature of this crash, we will be having a helicopter group as well. Lastly, we will have a human performance group, and this will not be its own group. It will actually be a part of the operations, air traffic control, and helicopter groups. They will study the crew performance and all before the accident factors that might be involved in human error, including fatigue, medication, medical histories, training, workload, equipment design, and work environment. Now we're going to take a few questions, but I will again stress we don't have a lot of information now. We will continue to gather that. We will try to release it as we can, but we will only talk about the facts of the case that we know right now. I'm going to ask, we'll call on a few people. I'm going to ask that you state your name and affiliation.
James Matthews from Sky News. So we've heard from President Trump today talking about DEI hiring policies within the FAA and associating that with the cause of this accident. What do you say to that?
Well, unfortunately, I didn't hear the remarks. I was briefing House and Senate members, but I believe, Chair, would you like to take that?
As part of any investigation, we look at the human, the machine, and the environment. So we will look at all the humans that were involved in this accident, Again, we will look at the aircraft, we will look at the helicopter, we will look at the environment in which they were operating in. That is standard in any part of our investigation. I'll turn it back.
Chair, can I ask you, has the flight data recorder been recovered yet? And what is the difficulty in a water disaster like this, which presents a very difficult environment for your investigators and the people out of the water right now?
Well, the question was on the flight data recorders. And we have not recovered the flight data recorders yet. We know they're there. They are underwater. This is not unusual for the NTSB. We have many times recovered flight data recorders in water. We have our lab right here that is about a mile from the NTSB, so it's not unusual. And once we get those, we'll be able to get those read and information from them to be able to provide further information to you.
Chair.
I'm going to turn it back over to Member Inman.
Hey there, Skylar Henry with CBS News. Earlier today, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said a mistake was made last night. Based off of you all's initial investigations and preliminary findings, have you all been able to tell whether this was human error or mechanical failure?
The question was, has there been human error or mechanical failure? We don't know what we know just yet. We do not know enough facts to be able to rule in or out human factor, mechanical factors. That is part of the NTSB investigative process and where all of these groups will come together. It's one of the reasons why the NTSB is known as the gold standard. We will take the time that's necessary, but I'd also like to reiterate, if we find something that is a significant issue that warrants immediate action, we will not hesitate to make those recommendations and make them public. We have a good track record on that, and we want to continue doing so. Sir.
Hello, Sir. Tom Costello with NBC News. Does it hurt your investigative process, maybe for the chairman, does it hurt your investigative process to have the president already suggesting possible causes here as you try to keep an open mind and begin this investigation?
Tom, with all due respect, I think the press also likes to state what probable cause is before we get to the probable cause. So what I'm going to say is you need to give us time. You need to give NTSB, it's not that we don't have information. We do have information. We have data. We have substantial amounts of information. We need to verify information. We need to take our time to make sure it is accurate. That's best for you. That's important for the families. It's important for legislators who are seeking answers to try to figure out what they're going to do about this. And so it will take time. We do have a lot of information, but we need some time to verify that.
Yeah, member Chase Williams with Fox Business. I'm wondering about the conditions in the tower last night. Were there any performance issues in the past with any of these controllers, anything of that nature?
The question is about controllers. As I said, we are just now forming the groups. The controllers do have union representation, which they are entitled to. They'll be working with our party system and our party groups. They'll be conducting interviews. Those interviews will need to be analyzed, transcribed, and other team members will need to look over it. It'll be a long process, but we will go through the entire history.
Michelle Del Rey, The Independent. My question is for the chairwoman. Can you tell us more about what the president and the vice president's responses were when you briefed them this afternoon?
Sure. So the question was about my briefing for the president and the vice president. As is standard, we offer briefings on our process and what we know, and this was a briefing with the president and vice president and with Secretary Duffy and Secretary Hegseth and also the acting administrator of the FAA. There was discussion on what we know so far and our process, and that was about it.
Madam Chairwoman, Stephanie Rothfuss with ABC News. Similar to Tom Costello's question, the President has stated what may have caused the crash, stating common sense. Does that affect your progress at all at this early stage?
Yeah, so the NTSB, we conduct an important safety mission where we take a very careful approach. I'm sorry, the question was on speculating during investigations, which is we often hear about. What I will say is we look at facts on our investigation, and that will take some time. And at some point, we'll be able to provide that factual information, as Member Inman said, and provide that hopefully tomorrow.
Hang on a second. Dave.
Have you been able to retrieve the black boxes from the helicopter? Has the military decided whether they're going to read those to the NTSB? And what about the ATC tapes? Have you guys been up to?
So the question was about black boxes, which are referred to as black boxes, which are typically orange. We have not recovered any of the boxes involved yet. We feel comfortable and confident that we will be able to. Right now, recovery of life is probably most important in those that were involved. I mean, there are still ongoing recovery efforts involving the fatalities involved, along with some debris is coming out as well. We will make sure that that perishable evidence is maintained. We have a great process for that. We will probably have more than one black box, so to speak. It's our understanding that the Sikorsky helicopter is equipped with some form of recording devices, and those will be read either by the DoD or by us. We have a good starting relationship with them, and we've already made agreements in order to be able to do that. So I feel comfortable in what we're going to be doing. The other question was about air traffic control. We received a very large package of information from the FAA at about 3 a.m., I believe, this morning. That is still being reviewed and analyzed. I would say there's a lot more information that usually comes in that than what you might find online and people might speculate about. And that is part of that overall process where we take the time to get the information correct and to make sure all the parties are engaged and involved and can fact check that information. One.
Gabe Cohen from CNN. Can you tell me if the NTSB has reviewed this FAA internal report that has been cited by the New York Times indicating that the controller that was on duty at the time of the crash was doing a job that's usually done by two people?
We have not reviewed any specific reports about the controllers at this time, at least from the leadership team. Our investigators are continuing to pull all that information, their personnel records, their files, where they were at, whether they were fatigued. All that information will be part of that investigative process. But right now we can't speculate on anything that may have been reported in the media until we get the opportunity to validate and understand how it impacts the investigation. We're going to take just a few more questions.
Let's follow up on that.
Sir?
Yeah, Oren Khan, Zebra Magazine. What's the process and the logistics like of bringing the families in? Are they coming into the airport? And how are you going to sort of treat the sensitivity of bringing them to the place where this tragedy happened?
So the question is about the families. And many of those families are still en route. Some are still being notified from both the military and from the commercial crash. There is a family assistance facility that's being stood up by American and PSA Airlines in Bethesda, Maryland. They've already been working on that, standing it up. Our team from our disaster assistance team has also been coordinating with them. We plan on briefing them. It is customary that at some point, if the families wish to go to part of the accident site, that we would arrange such a thing, but it will only be when we know that it's safe, we have the correct perishable evidence, and we can do it in the proper modesty that should be for those family members. It will be a little bit of a process, but it will take some time.
Sir, to follow up on the air traffic control system.
No. Sir, or you?
I know that Marielle Carbone with DC News Now. We've heard from some witnesses that they saw people were able to come down the slides of the plane. Has there been any indication that people made it off the plane into the water?
Well, again, we will not speak to the fatalities. The D.C. medical examiner will, but I think the D.C. fire chief this morning very succinctly said correctly that we believe there are no survivors.
What were they off the plane? Like, did they even get out of the plane?
Last question.
So, hang on one second. Right now, we're going through the debris fields. Nothing we've seen would indicate that maybe slides or chutes were deployed. It was a very quick, rapid impact. But we've seen nothing in that regard so far from the evidence we had, but we still need to verify all of that information. One more question?
Jeff Cook, ABC News.
Go ahead.
Jeff Cook, ABC News. What do you know about the altitude of the helicopter at the moment of impact? And can you talk about the procedures for such helicopters in that area?
The question was about the helicopter procedures, and in D.C. it's kind of a unique environment. We've been getting briefed more and more by the FAA. I'm not an air traffic control specialist, but they're actually helicopter zones, if you will, or tracks. And this one was transiting, I believe, from track 1 to 4 as part of their normal procedure. If you live in D.C., you see a lot of helicopters going down into this area, so there's a very well-defined system in that regard. As far as altitude, until we get the additional information, we can't validate or basically corroborate any of that until we get more of the electronic data and the data that's on the plane. I do want to clarify one question that also came about cell phones. You know, in today's age and time, a lot of electronics and other devices do contain a lot of different information. We've found on a number of our accidents that we actually are notified through a smartphone that may sense that. As part of our process, we will obviously treat all of the effects of the deceased with dignity. We are already starting to pull that information together. If we feel that it's necessary to find or pull some of that information, we will work with the families and make sure we do it in a manner that's respectful for them and their privacy. But right now, we don't have any plans specifically on that amount, on that area, until we need to. Thank you very much.
All right, there you have it. The NTSB just finished up their first update on the deadly collision since taking the lead last night.
Yeah, here are 3 things that we know about this investigation right now. First, that the National Transportation Safety Board's preliminary report of that crash will be available in 30 days. Flight data recorders have yet to be recovered. And lastly, the NTSB will look at all elements in that crash.
Yeah, something we heard them say, they're going to take a look at the human, the machine, and the environment. And of course, the question here, was there human error? Was there machine error? Those are some of the questions that are going to play out here. We do know the NTSB has launched a GO team to the crash site. So essentially, they've begun the journey of photo documenting the scene, analyzing evidence, trying to understand what exactly took place.
And as they were really clear in their news conference there, that this GO team doesn't interfere with the search and recovery that's taking place right now. What their job is to get information so that they can assess and determine, as we heard it there, a probable cause in this investigation.
Something else you're going to see to that point, Larry, is eventually over the coming months, they're going to painstakingly recraft essentially both of the aircrafts into a hangar. So then they can have a bigger understanding, bigger picture of what all played out, where the malfunctions were, what took place here. When they talk about the human, the machine, the environment, it kind of gives you an idea for just how vast this investigation is going to be, just how many different facets of it are going to be encompassed, and just how many stones they have to overturn, so to speak.
Yeah, and one of the things that's really interesting about the NTSB specifically is that they have subject matter experts on just about everything related to transportation. So there's a structures group, a systems group, a helicopter group. All of these groups have experts in this particular field that will be able to lend their expertise in helping to piece this investigation together, because they're going to be looking at so many angles to try to determine what exactly caused this collision.
Something I found was notable was that they were talking about how this today, Thursday, was their first full day on scene. We've been seeing over 300 responders, first responders, out at the crash site as they tried to look for survivors, try to help the victims. And so them talking about this is their first full day on scene is them saying, hey, we're letting the first responders do what they have to do. Now we're coming in to also do what we have to do. Joining us today is former Delta Airlines pilot, Lieutenant Colonel Alan Bullet Campbell. It is so good to have you with us. Again, we're terribly sorry for the circumstances, but thank you for joining us.
I wish it were a better circumstance also.
Yeah, let's talk about the traffic at the airport. That is something that's come up time and time again, that there is a significant amount of traffic at the airport, but in particular, that DCA is a difficult airport for pilots to land. How are those two things working at tandem? And in your estimation, what will the NTSB be able to glean from those two factors?
I think one thing they're not talking about so much, I understand that they had to change the runways. They had an airplane sitting on the active runway that wasn't ready to take off, so they switched the American airplane to a different runway, which is not unusual, but it put him more in the path of the Black Hawk. The Black Hawk apparently was a little higher than they normally are. I understand they're supposed to be down at like 200 feet. I understand understand now that they might have been 350 or 400 feet. That doesn't sound significant, but it can be catastrophic. And so this will all be uncovered with this investigation. I was watching the NTSB. They're just in the open door phase of this. They don't know a lot. They won't say a lot until they actually have the information. And there's a lot of things to prove. There's recordings on the commercial plane. There might be recordings on the military plane. I don't know. But a lot will be uncovered, and they'll figure out why this happened.
Lieutenant, I know that you specifically have flown in and out of DCA many times before. Can you kind of walk us through what that experience is like and how kind of delicate and precarious it can be if you don't time things correctly?
Right. It's a unique airport. A lot of airports just have open territory all over the place, like Dallas and Atlanta and Los Angeles. But when you go into that airport, you have to go up the Potomac River. You have the Pentagon, you have the White House, you have the Capitol. You cannot be over the land area. And so they prescribe that you go up the Potomac, which means you do a few little curvy turns heading up to the runway. And the normal runway just goes right off the river and you land. My understanding now, and again, this is initial, but there was an airplane that was not able to take off properly at that time. So they switched this airplane to a different runway, put it over a little bit different angle, and got it more into the zone of the Black Hawk helicopter. Again, that will be all uncovered. There should have been visibility. The helicopter should be able to hover. They can stop. The airliner cannot stop, obviously. So this will all be uncovered, and they'll figure out why this happened. When you think about two airplanes colliding, that is so unique. It never happens. It's incredibly rare.
Several questions from journalists in the room centered around this flight data recorder, those black boxes. What information do those machines do they provide?
Really an incredible amount of information about their airspeed, their altitude, their position, their maneuvering left or right or whatever. It'll just put the whole code of what they were doing as they approached the airport. But you have to remember that a commercial airplane is very predictable. They have flaps down, they have landing gear down, they have their speed reduced. They don't have a lot of maneuverability at that point, and they're low altitude, so they can't go down. They can go left, right, or up, but nothing abruptly. So they have the screens up there that'll tell them their collision potentials and whatever, and it might have given them a warning about the Black Hawk helicopter, but it may have been too late for them to actually take a maneuver to avoid the helicopter. Again, this will all be uncovered, and it's just a critical situation. And when they talk about the pilots of the helicopters perhaps having the visual lenses on, the night vision goggles, that may be a factor also. So there's a lot to be uncovered.
I wanted to ask you, just on an emotional level, given your background as a pilot, your expertise in that realm, when you watched what was unfolding yesterday, what went through your mind? Walk us through some of that.
It's just always sad. I turned the TV on early this morning and it popped right up on the screen at 4 a.m. And they talked about it constantly. And the tragedy is it's so rare. It's so unusual. It's the safest way to do transportation on this planet. Driving in your car or taking a taxi or walking in some areas is much more dangerous. And so when this happens, that's why it gets so much attention, because it's unique. And so, I was watching it uncover, and then you think, well, but the pilots have to continue flying. The passengers have to continue riding. The flight attendants have to continue working. And so people are just so incredible that they can see this, realize it's unusual, should not have happened, very, very rare. And so you just have to move on.
And I think so many of us are just trying to process understand what exactly unfolded yesterday here in the nation's capital. And once again, we certainly appreciate your time, your expertise, and we're sorry to be meeting you under these circumstances. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our Matthew Torres was at that news conference and has more on the update from investigators at Reagan National Airport. Matthew, we got a lot of information, at least some, that we didn't know before from the NTSB. Parse out for us what really stood out to you.
Matthew, can we see if we can get you to turn your mic on, Matthew? I'm not sure if we can. Give us 1 second, just working out some technical moving pieces here. We're all good. So he was just inside that news conference for the NTSB. And so we're going to get his perspective there was a lot of reporter questions being asked.
Right.
And let's go Matthew, we're going to send it back out to you. Bring us into that room. Tell us what you took from that press conference.
All right, so we're going to give him a second, and then we're going to go back out to him in a minute. But a lot was given from the NTSB as we're trying to get a better understanding of where they are in their sort of investigatory process and what things will look like as we move forward. Already there's been a lot of speculation and a lot of theories that are floating around as to what contributed to this. I think what the NTSB did was sort of level set with us, that a lot is still unknown. There's still a lot of questions, and they're still working through the process of trying to collect critical data that's going to allow them to come up with that preliminary report coming up in 30 days.
And that's something we'll be waiting for, certainly. Let's go back out to Matthew Torres. Matthew, we heard them say in this press conference they're going to be looking at the human, the machine, and the environment. What else did you take from that meeting today?
Yeah, so they're going to investigate every facet of this flight, every facet of the helicopter, the plane, knowing that they're going to create some groups to really focus on each element, whether that be the engine, the angle of this plane, as well as the air traffic control. The NTSB is really launching all of these efforts to make sure that they don't leave any stone unturned. What also stood out to me earlier was there were questions to the NTSB here, whether or not comments by President Donald Trump, the Secretary of Defense, as well as the Transportation Secretary, alluding to mistakes already made, if that may be impeding in progress or even as a distraction during this investigation. And as you heard from the chair of the NTSB, they're really putting that all aside right now to make sure they are not offering any speculation or even a glimpse of speculation until they can for certain that they are able to fully investigate this, and they are planning to be out here on the scene. They say as long as it takes to collect all of the evidence. We know that the families of these victims are still on their way here to DC, so that's why at some point they will also be briefing these family members as soon as they can. And you heard earlier as well how they still have not been able to recover those black boxes from both the helicopter and the plane as well. They're underwater, something that the NTSB is used to, so that part is really not completely unusual, but that will take some time. And so they're also saying that they have received a large package of information from the FAA, presumably about the air traffic control. They have yet to review that large package, as well as they're looking into they haven't looked into any other reports. There was another question about if they looked into reports of lack of employees and lack of personnel when handling these types of planes. They say they're still, again, holding off until they're able to review as much information as possible. You've said it already, in 30 days, a preliminary report will be out there. 50 NTSB personnel out here on the scene and will remain here as long as possible. Guys.
Their mission is to understand why it happened. Matthew, thank you for walking us through that. We appreciate it. Of course, we do know there's still a very active recovery happening right now in the Potomac.
Yeah, let's get on over to Melissa Kem. She's at Gravelly Point in Arlington, not far from the airport. When we saw you earlier this afternoon, Melissa, we saw a rather large response behind you in that area as investigators continue with their investigation there.
Yeah, hey there, guys. That crowd, that group of people, those hundreds of people, rescue efforts, that is still here. I want to show you what is happening here right now. If you want to look between those two trees there and way back far behind towards the water, that's where the recovery, most of the recovery efforts have been happening with a lot of these crews. We've seen them picking up what looks like pieces of debris and bringing them into that tan tent over to your left side over here. And I guess that is where they are analyzing to see what most of those things are. But we've seen FBI officials, we've seen Arlington County Police, as well as fire crews. So really federal, state, and local efforts here at Gravelly Point. And this is obviously having an effect on a lot of the people who live here in Northern Virginia as well. At Gravely Point in Arlington, federal, state, and local officials continue to recover debris from American Airlines Flight 5342. As police boats patrol the cold waters of the Potomac River, planes roar overhead and land at Reagan National Airport, where flights resumed at 11 o'clock this morning. Kristen Clark Taylor stood and watched those planes while holding a Bible and praying.
I didn't know anyone personally, but aren't we all members of the same human race? Aren't those children there my children too, and your children too? Doesn't that make us all belong to each other?
She lives in Reston, Virginia, but like so many others whose curiosity brought them to Gravely Point, felt comfort in being near the site.
What else would I do besides get as close as I could to the souls who perished, as close as I could to the spirit of our living God, and just say prayers.
Prayers of hope as they watch rescue crews carry pieces of the wreckage.
Prayers of strength, prayers of compassion for those souls, for the country, for the world, and just to show more of that is what my prayer is for each and every American in this nation.
Yeah, I think that Kristen there captured the emotions of what so many people are feeling and thinking right now. And Gravely Point and Dangerfield Island still closed at this hour. U.S. Park Police also asking drivers to avoid stopping right here. You see all this traffic kind of getting towards rush hour now in the middle of George Washington Memorial Parkway. We have seen a lot of folks slow down and take out their phones, try to take pictures and videos. Police are telling you to please not do that, obviously for the flow of traffic and the potential of any mishaps that could happen with that. So again, please keep traffic flowing here if you are driving in this area, if you know someone that is driving in this area. But again, we'll continue to monitor the recovery efforts behind us here. But for now, back to you guys in the studio.
We know there are 39 families still waiting to have their loved one recovered.
And as flights are now back in progress at DCA, underneath as they are landing on the runway, an active investigation sits below them. Melissa Kim, thank you so much. First responders are dealing with some tough conditions during the recovery mission.
Let's go ahead and bring in meteorologist Caitlin McGrath for some more context here, because Caitlin, one of the questions we keep getting is how cold is the water? What other factors are the crews encountering out there?
Yeah, Simone, that water temperature is the biggest thing to note here as those recovery efforts are continuing to be underway. That water temperature only 36 degrees right around the site where they are working on that recovery. Now, at the time of the collision, wind was coming in from the northwest, gusting up to 26 miles per hour. We've heard a lot of that debris has already moved really far down the river, and that wind, no doubt, had a contribution to that. But otherwise, conditions last night, crystal clear skies. The wind was the biggest thing to note. And today, most of the day has been quite nice. The weather has been amenable for those cleanup efforts. We've had calmer winds, clear skies, but that is going to change here over the next several hours. We'll see clouds increasing later tonight and then rain that's going to develop shortly after midnight and continue through much of the day tomorrow. So no doubt making for a really difficult day tomorrow, off and on rain, moderate to even heavy at times, especially throughout the afternoon. We, of course, have issued a weather impact alert as a result. But then as we look ahead toward the weekend, the weather will take a more tranquil turn and we'll see nice sunshine back for Saturday and Sunday.
Caitlin, thank you. Of course, in times like these, we think of the victims. And so that's where we're going to go now. We're starting to learn the names of the people who have lost their lives in this awful tragedy.
Well, this is one of the pilots on board the American Airlines flight, 28-year-old Samuel Liley. In a post, Liley's father said, quote, "Now it hurts so bad I can't even cry myself to sleep. I know I'll see him again, but my heart is breaking."
Also on board that flight, Ian Epstein. He was a 53-year-old flight attendant based out of Charlotte, North Carolina. His family says he leaves behind 2 children.
Also identified tonight, the crew chief on board the Black Hawk helicopter. This is Ryan O'Hara. Our sister station in Atlanta confirmed the news earlier this morning. He leaves behind a wife and a 1-year-old son.
There are also local victims to talk about. Some people on the plane were part of the Fairfax County public school system.
The district put out a statement saying in part, quote, "Our hearts are broken as we learn that we have lost members of our FCPS family in the tragic accident at Reagan National Airport last night. I invite you to join me in praying for our families, friends, and colleagues that we know have lost loved ones in this tragic accident."
Now, some people on the plane were also former Loudoun County students. The district said, quote, "This unimaginable loss has deeply affected our community, and with great sorrow, we have learned that multiple victims were former LCPS students. Many other Loudoun families have also been impacted. We extend our deepest condolences to all those grieving in the wake of this tragedy."
We're learning that members of a Prince George's County-based labor union were also on board that flight, Flight 5342. Steamfitters Local 602 confirms that 4 of their members died in the crash.
The union represents over 5,000 journeymen, apprentices, and helpers in the D.C. region. In a statement on social media, union leaders said in part, quote, "As more information continues to come in, we are heartbroken to confirm that 4 members of UA Steamfitters Local 602 were among the victims of the American Airlines flight yesterday." The entire United Association is grateful to first responders who worked tirelessly throughout the night and who will continue to investigate what happened.
Well, this tragedy has affected many families locally and many in the figure skating community as well. We know that local figure skaters were on that plane heading back from a competition in Wichita.
John Duran is in Ashburn at one of the rinks that those children used to skate at. John, tell us about this. I mean, this is just devastating.
Simone, it's been heartbreaking to see. This is the Ashburn Ice House, and all day we have seen parents with their children, most of the children in skating gear, with flowers in their hands and a lot of them with tears in their eyes. This is, we're told, where many of the children skated at the Ashburn Ice House. I want to take you inside. That's where we're told skaters, people that knew the figure skaters that died, are grieving right now, and you see a memorial has begun to set up and people keep adding to it, as recent as a few minutes ago. Today I spoke to a local figure skating coach who says he didn't know the kids who lost their lives personally, but his ex-wife Ina Volyanskaya, or Ina V as the skaters I've talked to have called her, was their coach and was on the plane last night. He tells me the kids were 12 to 15 years old, but a skater I talked to here says some of them were 10 or 11 years old. They stayed beyond the national championships that happened in Wichita for some elite coaching.
These kids were just doing an extra thing. It's called a developmental camp, and they stay for an extra couple of days, and then they go off and do this, and then they just took their flight home, and unfortunately they didn't make it home. And it's too hard to even wrap around how many people are affected by this in our skating community. One of our students, she was going to be on that flight and then took an earlier flight. So that even for all of us is like so crazy.
Yeah, Lancel tells me the group that was on the plane was staying for a developmental camp that only 25 to 40 kids across the country are invited to. He says these kids were the future of skating, and many of them from right here in our area. I also spoke to skaters and their parents as they've been going in and out today, and they say Ina V, who is the well-known coach here that was on the plane last night, was supposed to be coaching right now. Some skaters are getting on the ice, but it is mainly grieving going on inside the Ashburn Ice House right now. This is a very tight-knit community that is going through a lot today. Larry, Simone.
As we know all too well, these tragedies don't happen in a vacuum, right? They impact communities. John, just as you were explaining, thank you for bringing us into that community tonight. We appreciate it.
Well, we're also learning that members of the Skating Club of Boston were on that flight. Athlete Jenna Hahn and her mother Jen, athlete Spencer Lane and his mom Christine, Vadim Nomov, and Jenya Shishokova were also on board.
Today we heard from Douglas Lane. He's learning to live without his wife and his son.
In his home club in Boston was just loved by everyone, from the adults running the club to the smallest skaters to the people that are, competing for a shot at the Olympics. They all just adored him.
The skaters were all in Kansas for a national development camp related to the U.S. Figure Skating Championships.
This crash is bringing back some really painful memories of another aviation disaster. 43 years ago this very month, Air Florida Flight 90 crashed into the 14th Street Bridge.
Yeah, it happened on January 13th, 1982, just moments after takeoff from Reagan National. That crash sent debris and passengers into the frozen Potomac River. 78 lives were lost that day, 74 on the plane and 4 in vehicles on the bridge. Investigators found that the crash was caused by a lack of de-icing and pilot error.
Flying remains one of the safest ways to travel. The last deadly crash involving a U.S. commercial airline happened nearly 16 years ago. A Continental Airlines flight operated by Colgan Air crashed on approach to Buffalo. Everyone on board that flight died. That included 45 passengers, 2 pilots, 2 flight attendants. 1 person on the ground was also killed. An investigation determined that the captain accidentally caused the plane to stall.
Well, President Donald Trump spoke about the crash earlier this morning, and he wasted no time blaming Democratic policies for what happened.
Rafael Sanchez Cruz listened in on today's news conference. And Rafa, the president made a whole lot of claims, but no evidence really to back it up.
Yeah, Simone, Larry, President Donald Trump said former Presidents Barack Obama and Joe Biden undermined air traffic safety by supporting diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, over competency. Let's listen.
It's all under investigation.
I understand that. That's why I'm trying to figure out how you can come to the conclusion right now that diversity had something to do with this crash.
Because I have common sense, okay? And unfortunately, a lot of people don't.
President Donald Trump doubling down on his analysis of what he says may have caused the air collision near DCA.
The people in the helicopter should have seen where they were going. I have helicopters. You can stop a helicopter very quickly. It had the ability to go up or down. It had the ability to turn.
The president, vice president, and secretary of defense all pointed at DEI hiring under Democratic leadership as a possible factor in Wednesday's tragedy.
We have to have our smartest people. It doesn't matter what they look like, how they speak, who they are. It matters intellect, talent.
What evidence have you seen to support these claims?
It just could have been.
It's one thing for internet pundits to spew off conspiracy theories. It's another for the President of the United States to throw out idle speculation as bodies are still being recovered and families still being notified. It just turns your stomach.
Former Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg pushed back on Trump's claims, posting on X. President Trump now oversees the military and the FAA. One of his first acts was to fire and suspend some of the key personnel who helped keep our skies safe. Trump mentioned this Fox article with the headline, FAA's diversity push includes focus on hiring people with severe intellectual and psychiatric disabilities.
And then it says FAA says people with severe disabilities are most underrepresented segment of the workforce, and they want them in, and they want them. They can be air traffic controllers. I don't think so.
The president says he's looking to restore air safety through this executive order, directing the Secretary of Transportation and the Federal Aviation Association to stop DEI hiring programs and to return to, quote, non-discriminatory merit-based hiring. President Trump says he has no issue firing those in the industry who are not competent. He also says that Americans should feel safe flying. Outside the White House, Rafael Sanchez Cruz, WUSA 9.
Rafael, thank you so much. Now, just to recap, about 30 minutes ago, the NTSB gave an update on their investigation. Here's what you need to know right now.
So the NTSB's preliminary report on the crash will be available in 30 days. The flight data recorders have not yet been recovered. And lastly, the NTSB will look at the elements of the crash. That includes the victims and all elements of the plane. If you believe you may have a loved one on board Flight 5324, American Airlines has set up a toll-free hotline. The number is here on your screen. It's 800-679-8215. Again, 800-679-8215. A lot of people are wondering how something like this could have happened, even with high-tech safety measures in place. Senior transportation correspondent Chris Van Cleve is giving us some more context on that part of the story.
The layers of aviation safety around an airport like Washington Reagan are numerous. You have air traffic controllers, and we know they were engaged here talking to the aircraft involved. You would also typically have something called TCAS, a collision avoidance system on board the airliner. However, below about 1,000 feet, that system doesn't alarm. Based on the way the aircraft appear to have lined up, it's likely the pilots of the airliner never saw that helicopter coming. A plane is not like your car. You can't look out the side view or rear view mirror. You can't look over your shoulder and see behind you. You have a limited field of view in that, you've got the windows, you can sort of see left and you can sort of see right, but you can't see necessarily behind you. And just a few hundred feet above the ground, those pilots' focus would be on the runway ahead of them and getting the airplane down safely. We don't know a lot about what was going on board that military helicopter. We don't know what those pilots saw or what they were looking at. It is busy airspace. It was at night, so while there was clear visibility, you are looking at basically flashing lights in the dark. And this is an arrival pattern, so there are other airplanes behind the one that they ultimately collided with. These accidents are a bit like a chain link. Several events come together in order for this accident to happen. If any one of them doesn't occur, the accident doesn't occur. The NTSB will investigate, answers will come. That will take time. For now, certainly one of the things investigators are going to look to understand is why was the helicopter operating where it was? Was it within the normal flight rules around Reagan National Airport, which is 200 feet or below for helicopter traffic? And how just did these two aircraft come together like they did remains the obvious question at this hour. Answers could take a year or more before a final NTSB report is prepared. Chris Van Cleve, CBS News, Phoenix.
Well, there's new information on the U.S. Army helicopter involved in that midair collision. Charlie D'Agata has that part of the story from the Pentagon.
Military officials told us that the Army UH Black Hawk helicopter out of Fort Belvoir, Virginia, taking part in that training flight. It's about 17 miles south of Reagan National Airport. The Black Hawk belonged to B Company, Bravo Company, 12th Aviation Battalion. Again, that has been grounded for 48 hours, an operational pause. Officials confirmed 3 soldiers were on board. None of them were senior officials, and we make that point because oftentimes these helicopters along the Potomac are tasked with transporting senior defense officials. Pete Hegseth said last night that an investigation was launched immediately by the Army and Defense Department. He also called the incident absolutely tragic.
It was a fairly experienced crew, and that was doing a required annual night evaluation. They did have night vision goggles.
Now, these helicopters are often used to transport military personnel and take part in other duties around the D.C. area. So, of course, in part of that training, they need to learn how to travel at night in congested airspace and learn the flight patterns near the airport. A law enforcement source familiar with the investigation tells CBS News investigators will examine pilot experience specifically in the D.C. airspace. Charlie D'Agata, CBS News at the Pentagon.
Right now, let's bring in Dr. Alan Deal. He's a former NTSB investigator.
All right. Do we have you, Doctor?
Yes, you do.
Okay.
And incidentally, I also worked for the FAA and the Pentagon, but that's another story.
All right.
Hey, we wish we could keep you forever.
Right. He's had a lot of important positions there.
Right. Okay, let's dive right in. I wanted to ask you, so the investigation here is just in its beginning stages. So I'm just curious here, when you first saw the video of the collision, what did you take from that, especially being a former NTSB investigator? What did your brain do? What did you see?
Well, I guess there was certainly one red flag, and you know, we all saw the video of the helicopter coming in from the north, which is from the left to the right, striking the American Airlines regional jet. But I noticed there was another aircraft that was airborne in that vicinity at the time. And I know I've flown in and out of Reagan Airport as a pilot, okay? The FAA has a fleet of airplanes there. I flew in and out of there many times. And a lot of times, just in general, it's hard to know which airplane the controller is talking about especially at night, and especially if there's a lot of city lights around behind the both airplanes, both the American Airlines aircraft, and the other aircraft that's in the video. And so my reaction is, I wonder, and I stress the word wonder, if maybe the Army pilots weren't looking at the wrong airplane, and that's very understandable how that could happen.
Dr. Deal, can you walk us through the sort of early stages of this investigation? Are investigators walking in with a sort of theory that they're trying to either prove or disprove, or are they allowing sort of the facts to take them where it will take them?
The latter. I'm free. I'm not an NTSB investigator anymore, but they always let the evidence guide them, and I'm free to speculate. And it's not like they don't have any clue as to what might have happened, but they look very carefully at the evidence and follow the facts. And many times this theory, like the one I just threw out about looking at the wrong airplane, turns out to be wrong. Unfortunately, that Black Hawk I don't think had a so-called cockpit voice recorder. It had other electronic recording devices, but it would have been very handy to know what the two helicopter pilots were talking about. And of course, the other thing that the Secretary of Defense mentioned is they had night vision goggles aboard the Black Hawk, and that's significant. I've flown in helicopters with night vision goggles. I'm not a helicopter pilot, but it really limits your vision. I'm not saying they used them. That's what the NTSB, with the help of the Pentagon, will have to establish. But if they were using night vision goggles, that could have complicated their ability, if you will, to spot the other two aircraft.
Look, we know that this is a tight, well-controlled airspace, of course. You've flown in and out of this airport as a pilot. How would you just describe it to us, that experience of trying to land a plane in such a controlled environment?
Well, it's a difficult dance. Maybe, I don't know, I'm not trying to be too flip because of the 67 fatalities. But it's almost like a dance where, the controllers have to maintain what they call the picture of where all the planes are. And by the same token, the pilots really have to work with each other, and they try to cooperate, space out if they have to, slow down if they have to allow people to get off the runway. Of course, you have those basically three intersecting runways. So, everyone would like to use the long runway, the north-south runway, and that's where the airliner originally was headed when the controllers, probably because of other traffic, told them, no, land on runway 33, which is to the northwest. So, it's a complicated dance, and you have to be willing to work very closely with the controllers, and, of course, you're watching for other traffic, and when you're in the landing phase, you're very busy. In this case, they were landing on a different runway, so they probably had to reprogram a couple of their computers to help them properly land. I'm not qualified to fly the regional jet, but I'm sure everybody was very busy, and unfortunately, things just came together, in this particular instance to lead to a tragedy.
Dr. Deal, there might be folks at home that aren't fully aware of the expertise of investigators, NTSB investigators, and what they do. For those at home that are sort of concerned that they may not get the sort of definitive answer that they're looking for, what can you tell us about the men and women that make up the NTSB?
Well, the actual civil servants at NTSB come in a variety of skills and backgrounds. I happen to be an aviation psychologist. I'm also a pilot, and in fact, I survived a plane crash myself, which got me interested in the whole field. But they have physiologists, they have metallurgists, they have people that specialize in reading data recorders, and air traffic controllers. So they have every imaginable specialty within the NTSB. But the NTSB also relies very heavily on the manufacturers and controllers that are out there controlling traffic on a daily basis. So they don't make all the decisions themselves. They have what they call the party system. So they'll bring in the union, they'll bring in the Army pilots so that they can understand exactly the unique requirements of the job and what may have gone wrong that particular time and situation.
Dr. Deal, a quick question for you. I was just wondering, we were talking about Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. During this press conference with President Donald Trump, he had said essentially flat out that mistakes were made. And again, from your past as an investigator, is that unusual to see, you know, I guess accountability or blame being placed that soon on?
Yeah, to be honest, I was surprised that that they did make those pronouncements. I mean, clearly their mistakes were made, but I think the implication was that somehow the Army pilots should not have hit the airliner. Well, obviously they shouldn't, but normally the executive part of the federal government withholds any statements. It's almost like a criminal investigation. You don't want to influence the fact-finding process. So I was a little surprised that there were pronouncements about what might have gone wrong, and we're all familiar with the DEI suggestions that were thrown out. So, but the one thing about the NTSB, Congress set that up to be independent. So I have great faith that they will fulfill their charter and do a thorough and independent job of assessing the facts and coming to logical conclusions. And of course, this will take weeks, months, or maybe longer before they release their final report. Under international law, they have to release an initial preliminary report within 30 days. So we'll know things fairly quickly, but the final report will be months in coming, I'm sure.
And no doubt that preliminary report will at least give us some important information that we don't have right now. Dr. Alan Deal, thank you so much. We appreciate it. You can expect more from WUSA 9 on this breaking news. For updates anytime, download the WUSA 9 mobile app on your phone and watch us anytime for free on WUSA 9 Plus.
WUSA 9 Weather Impact is sponsored by Morgan & Morgan.
And we had a nice day today, but looking ahead to tomorrow, a weather impact alert for rain that's going to soak out most of our Friday. The rain will develop late tonight and last through Friday evening, so you need to plan ahead now for both a slow morning and evening commute. Send the kids off to the bus stop in the morning with the rain gear. They are going to need it. So we'll walk you through Futurecast here. Clouds will continue to increase over the next several hours, and by 11 o'clock tonight, as you're checking back in with Topper, he'll already be tracking that rain moving across our southwestern counties down toward Woodstock, Culpeper, Fredericksburg, and then by the time you wake up on Friday morning, just about everyone seeing this rain. Now we are forecasting more rainfall for areas along and south of I-66. Notice the farther north you are, the longer you'll stay dry, but even you'll see some off and on showers throughout most of the day on Friday. This is right around 12 o'clock. Widespread moderate to occasionally heavy rain, and that will continue into the evening hours. By 6 o'clock, we're starting to see the last of this move along the I-95 corridor, and by 8-9 o'clock the rain is out of here and skies will start to clear as we head through late Friday evening. Now when all is said and done, we are looking at a good drink of water, especially for those areas that will see the rain for a little bit longer throughout the evening and overnight hours and into the day on Friday. That's where we could get closer to an inch of rain for areas around the metro, down toward Manassas, La Plata, Culpeper. The farther north you are, the less rain you can expect, and it's not just the rain we're tracking but also some wind. We'll talk more about that coming up at 4 o'clock.
I just saw a fireball and then it was just gone. So I haven't seen anything since they hit the river.
It just looked like a lightning bolt, like a very bright lightning bolt, and then it was just like smoke, and then everything just cleared.
We are now at a point where we are switching from a rescue operation to a recovery operation.
And it is a busy airport. It's a well-run airport. It's a well-managed airport, experienced staff here. And so we do need those questions answered.
What I've seen so far, do I think this was preventable? Absolutely.
We want you to know that we in the Wichita community are standing in one loud voice together.
This was a dark and excruciating night in our nation's capital and in our nation's history, and a tragedy of terrible proportions.
Right now in the news at 4, we continue our breaking news coverage of the deadly DCA air disaster. Thanks for joining us. I'm Larry Miller.
And I'm Simone D'Alba. Officials say there were no survivors after a U.S. Army Black Hawk helicopter crashed into an American Airlines regional jet last night over the Potomac River. The Earth camera above the National Mall catching the collision as the plane was attempting to land at Reagan National Airport.
Right now, recovery crews are still searching the Potomac River for victims. Here's a live look at boats searching the waters right now. Emergency authorities switched to a recovery effort earlier this morning. They said that 28 victims have been recovered so far.
The National Transportation Safety Board is now leading this investigation. They just gave us an update in the last hour. They say they hope to have a preliminary report within 30 days.
We are all here because this is an all-hands on-deck event. And we're here to assure the American people that we are going to leave no stone unturned in this investigation. We are going to conduct a thorough investigation of this entire tragedy, looking at the facts.
Our Matthew Torres was at that news conference. He has an update on where the investigation stands tonight. Matthew?
Well, Larry, a big takeaway from that press conference is that the NTSB is not going to be releasing any possible explanation as far as what happened that led to this collision anytime soon. They are not wanting to feed into any speculation and steering clear from any previous remarks, one being from the Secretary of Defense that already called out that there were mistakes here. They don't want to really provide any speculation whatsoever. They say they're going to remain here on scene as long as it takes to make sure they can answer not only what happened, but why to prevent this from happening again.
A devastating turn to the deadly midair collision over the Potomac River. The D.C. Fire and EMS chief says he expects not one single survivor.
We are now at a point where we are switching from a rescue operation to a recovery operation. At this point, we don't believe there are any survivors from this accident.
American Eagle Flight 5342 was in its final approach when it collided with a military Black Hawk helicopter on a training flight.
Like a very bright lightning bolt, and then it was just like smoke, and then everything just cleared.
60 passengers and 4 crew members were on the plane, including athletes and coaches of U.S. figure skating. Defense officials say a captain, staff sergeant, and chief warrant officer were in the helicopter.
At this time, we don't know why the military aircraft came into the path of the PSA aircraft.
The new Secretary of Transportation, Sean Duffy, says both aircraft were in standard flight patterns. Not one breakdown in communication with air traffic control. He adds the helicopter was aware of the plane in the area.
What I've seen so far, do I think this was preventable? Absolutely.
But U.S. Senator Mark Warner of Virginia says it's too early to make that call as the NTSB takes over the investigation. He and other lawmakers have been vocal against adding more flights to DCA out of concern the airspace is overcrowded.
We know how busy National is. We know the level of helicopter traffic just because we're the nation's capital that has to be part of the airspace. We express those concerns, but again, there'll be a time for that kind of discussion, but it's obviously not right now.
The airport reopened about 14 hours later. This while crews from multiple agencies search for more victims in 3 different wreckage sites.
I boarded a plane so many times. The feeling is always the same. I know I'll get from one destination to the other, but it's still always scary for me.
Now, the NTSB has about 50 members working this investigation. They say they have yet to find the black boxes from the helicopter and the plane from the wreckage sites as well. We also know that they are planning to inform the families of these victims, many of whom are still on their way here to D.C., but they are also in the process of creating groups to analyze every facet of these flights, from hydraulics to the flight angles to air traffic control and engines as well, guys.
And we know that debris is being taken right now from the Potomac and being analyzed as they get that investigation underway. Matthew Torres, thank you so much.
We do know, of course, as Matthew was talking about, there's still a very active recovery happening right now as we speak in the Potomac. At last check, 28 bodies had been recovered.
Yeah, let's get over to Melissa Kim. She's at Gravelly Point in Arlington County, not far from the airport. Melissa?
Yeah, hey there, guys. We're actually right across this, the highway here, George Washington Memorial Parkway, from where planes land. We've seen several of them land, at least more than a dozen or so, since 11 o'clock this morning when flights resumed. Now, new right here, where you see this black truck right here, this is where they've been, the area that crews have been bringing out debris from the Potomac River and taking it into that tan, neutral colored tent that you see back there. That is where the debris and wreckage has been analyzed. And we've seen several people coming here that live in the neighborhood to see what's going on, and they're affected by a lot of what's been happening here as well. At Gravelly Point in Arlington, federal, state, and local officials continue to recover debris from American Airlines Flight 5342. As police boats patrol the cold waters of the Potomac River, planes roar overhead and land at Reagan National Airport, where flights resumed at 11 o'clock this morning. Kristen Clark Taylor stood and watched those planes while holding a Bible and praying.
I didn't know anyone personally, but aren't we all members of the same human race? Aren't those children there my children too, and your children too? Doesn't that make us all belong to each other?
She lives in Reston, Virginia, but like so many others whose curiosity brought them to Gravelly Point, felt comfort in being near the site.
What else would I do besides get as close as I could to the souls who perished, as close as I could to the spirit of our living God, and just say prayers.
Prayers of hope as they watch rescue crews carry pieces of the wreckage.
Prayers of strength, prayers of compassion for those souls, for the country, for the world, and just to show more of that is what my prayer is for each and every American in this nation.
Now, in just the last half hour, we've seen more crews arrive. This time, the Arlington County Fire Department has arrived here to help with some of these rescue efforts. As you're looking live now at George Washington Memorial Parkway, where the rush hour traffic is starting to pick up quite a bit. And the U.S. Parks Department police, they are asking drivers to please not slow down or stop in the middle of the parkway right now. As you see, a lot of folks are doing just that, observing what is going on, but they're asking that you keep traffic flowing and to not stop and try to take pictures of the recovery effort that is happening behind us. But we'll continue to monitor everything that's been happening here. But for now, we're live at Gravelly Point. I'm Melissa Kim. Back to you guys in the studio.
There are 39 families still waiting to hear word about their loved ones' remains, and we have some inclement weather that's going to be moving into the area. So those first responders are going to be working around the clock. Melissa, thank you for your reporting tonight.
Well, speaking of first responders are dealing with some tough conditions during the recovery mission, as we just talked about.
Let's go ahead and bring in meteorologist Caitlin McGrath for some more context here, because Caitlin, a lot of questions about just how cold the water is and a few other factors that crews might be encountering.
Yeah, that's exactly right, you guys. And the water temperature is the greatest thing of note when it comes to this recovery. That water temperature right around the site is around 36 degrees right now. Now, at the time of the collision last night, skies were clear. The wind was gusty. We did have big wind throughout much of the day yesterday, and right around 9 o'clock we had a gust of 26 miles per hour right near that collision, and that it did cause some of the debris to get pushed a little bit farther down the river. But the water temperature is going to be the biggest thing to contend with here over the next several days. And then tomorrow we add on the rain. Today the weather was relatively cooperative. We had calmer wind, mostly clear skies, but clouds will continue to increase here as we head through the evening hours, and then by overnight that rain rolls in, and it's going to be moderate to heavy at times, no doubt, making those recovery efforts more difficult. That's going to last throughout the day on Friday. The rain really doesn't clear out of here until 7 or 8 o'clock tomorrow night. So, of course, we've issued a weather impact alert ahead of that widespread rain that we'll see throughout much of the day tomorrow. And then we do clear skies out for the weekend, much calmer for the first weekend of February. Hard to believe, with milder temperatures on Saturday before it turns a bit cooler by Sunday.
All right, Caitlin, thank you. Tonight, we are starting to learn the names of the people who have lost their lives in this terrible tragedy.
This is one of the pilots on board the American Airlines flight, 28-year-old Samuel Liley. In a Facebook post, Liley's father said that, quote, "Now it hurts so bad I can't even cry myself to sleep. I know I'll see him again, but my heart is breaking."
Also on board the flight, we have Ian Epstein. He was a 53-year-old flight attendant based out of Charlotte, North Carolina. His family says he leaves behind 2 children.
Also identified tonight, the crew chief on board the Black Hawk helicopter. This is Ryan O'Hara. He's from our sister station in Atlanta, confirming this news earlier today. He leaves behind a wife and a 1-year-old son.
There are also local victims to talk about tonight. According to Fairfax County Public Schools, 3 of their students and 6 of their parents died in this crash. They were returning from a figure skating event in Wichita, Kansas.
The district put out a statement saying, in part, quote, "Our hearts are broken as we learn that we have lost members of our FCPS family in the tragic accident at Reagan National Airport last night. I invite you to join me in praying for our families, friends, and colleagues that we know have lost loved ones in this tragic accident."
Some people on the plane were also former Loudoun County students. The district said, quote, "This unimaginable loss has deeply affected our community, and with great sorrow, we have learned that multiple victims were former LCPS students. Many other Loudoun families have also been impacted, and we extend our deepest condolences to all those grieving in the wake of this tragedy."
We're learning that members of a Prince George's County-based labor union were also on board American Airlines flight 5342. Steamfitters Local 602 confirms that 4 of their members died in the crash.
So this union represents over 5,000 journeymen, apprentices, and helpers in the D.C. region specifically. In a statement on social media, union leaders said in part, quote, "As more information continues to come in, we are heartbroken to confirm that 4 members of UA Steamfitters Local 602 were among the victims of the American Airlines flight yesterday. The entire United Association is grateful to the first responders who worked tirelessly throughout the night and who will continue to investigate what happened."
Well, this tragedy has affected many families locally and many in the figure skating community as well. And we know that local figure skaters were on that plane heading back from a competition in Wichita, Kansas.
Really heartbreaking details we're learning. John Duran is in Ashburn at one of the rinks that the children used to skate at. And John, you were telling us earlier, this is impacting the entire community.
Yeah, Simone, we have seen all day people heading inside the Ashburn Ice House, where I'm told many of the victims trained and skated, but they've come in with flowers in their hands, and I've talked to many of them. Parents, skaters, both that knew the victims in this crash, even coaches that coached the victims, going inside, many of them with tears in their eyes so they can be together, which is what is going on inside the Ashburn Ice House right now. We got a look inside earlier today. This is the memorial that continues to grow inside. Flowers, balloons being left since we've been here late this morning. We're told families who knew the victims are grieving and remembering their friends inside. We spoke to one father and his 10-year-old daughter, Alexis, who knew many of the children, some as young as her, that were killed last night.
One of them, the one named Franco, he really wanted to go to the Olympics, and then he was really excited, but now he can't go. And then my other one, her name is Lydia, and she's my age, and she just got a new dance partner, and now she can't dance with her partner. And Lydia's sister, her name is Everly, and she can do triples, but and she wanted to go to the Olympics too, and she's a really good skater. And then another one is named Brielle, and she's really, really talented, and she can do triples too. And I I look after those people, and they were my inspiration.
She said to my wife on the way to school this morning, I don't know how to feel. And we said, whatever you do, just try and feel.
Yeah, Jeff, who you just heard from, says his daughter Alexis, 10-year-old Alexis, is here every day for 5 to 6 hours. He says some of the families that skate here homeschool their children so they could spend more time at the rink. This is a very, very close-knit community, and these people are like family. I mean, they're spending so much time together, and just heartbreaking to hear Alexis talk about her friends as she tries to process this. Just a really tough to hear, and I'm sure very tough for her right now.
Just to hear the words, just try to feel, I think summed up how all of us, that echoes with all of us right now. John, thank you.
We're also learning that members of the Skating Club of Boston were on that flight. Athlete Jenna Hahn and her mother Jen, athlete Spencer Lane and his mother Christine, Vadim Nomov and Jenya Shishikova were also on board as well.
Today we heard from Douglas Lane. He's learning to live without his wife and his son.
In his home club in Boston was just loved by everyone, from the adults running the club to the smallest skaters to the people that are, competing for a shot at the Olympics. They all just adored him.
The skaters were all in Kansas for a national development camp related to the U.S. Figure Skating Championships.
This crash is bringing back some really painful memories of another aviation disaster. 43 years ago this month, Air Florida Flight 90 crashed into the 14th Street Bridge.
Yeah, it happened on January 13th, 1982, just moments after takeoff from Reagan National. That crash sent debris and passengers into the frozen Potomac River. 78 people lost their lives, 74 on the plane and 4 on the bridge. Investigators found that the crash was caused by a lack of de-icing and pilot error.
Flying does remain one of the safest ways to travel. The last deadly crash involving a U.S. commercial airline, that happened nearly 16 years ago. A Continental Airlines flight operated by Colgan Air crashed on approach to Buffalo. Everyone on board this plane died. That included 45 passengers, 2 pilots and 2 flight attendants. 1 person on the ground was also killed. An investigation determined that the captain had accidentally caused that plane to stall.
President Donald Trump spoke about the crash earlier today. He wasted no time blaming Democrats and their policies for what happened.
Rafael Sanchez Cruz listened in on today's news conference. And Rafa, the president made a whole lot of claims, some stunning claims, quite frankly, with no evidence.
That's right, Larry. Simone, we heard NTSB officials say they're not getting ahead of this investigation, but President Donald Trump and his cabinet members did not hold back. Trump accused former presidents Joe Biden and Barack Obama of undermining air traffic safety by supporting diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, over competency.
It's all under investigation.
I understand that. That's why I'm trying to figure out how you can come to the conclusion right now that diversity had something to do with this crash.
Because I have common sense, okay? And unfortunately, a lot of people don't.
President Donald Trump doubling down on his analysis of what he says may have caused the air collision near DCA.
The people in the helicopter should have seen where they were going. I have helicopters. You can stop a helicopter very quickly. It had the ability to go up or down. It had the ability to turn.
The president, vice president, and secretary of defense all pointed at DEI hiring under Democratic leadership as a possible factor in Wednesday's tragedy.
We have to have our smartest people. It doesn't matter what they look like, how they speak, who they are. It matters intellect, talent.
What evidence have you seen to support these claims?
It just could have been.
It's one thing for internet pundits to spew off conspiracy theories. It's another for the President of the United States to throw out idle speculation as bodies are still being recovered and families still being notified. it just turns your stomach.
Former Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg pushed back on Trump's claims, posting on X. President Trump now oversees the military and the FAA. One of his first acts was to fire and suspend some of the key personnel who helped keep our skies safe. Trump mentioned this Fox article with the headline, FAA's diversity push includes focus on hiring people with severe intellectual and psychiatric disabilities.
And then it says FAA says people with severe disabilities are most underrepresented segment of the workforce, and they want them in, and they want them, they can be air traffic controllers. I don't think so.
The president says he's looking to restore air safety through this executive order, directing the Secretary of Transportation and the Federal Aviation Association to stop DEI hiring programs and to return to, quote, non-discriminatory merit-based hiring.
President Donald Trump also said that those in the industry who are incompetent should be removed from their positions. He also assured the American public that it is safe to fly. Outside the White House, Rafael Sanchez Cruz, WUSA 9.
Well, the NTSB investigators tell us they're going to be looking at all sort of factors, including human factors as well. So we will see what role this may or may not have played in the probable cause for this crash. Rafael, thank you.
Now, if you believe you have a loved one that might have been on board Flight 5324, American Airlines has set up a toll-free hotline for you. The number is 800-679-8215. Again, 800-679-8215. We'll be right back.
WUSA 9 Weather Impact Alert is sponsored by Morgan & Morgan.
Clouds will continue to increase here over the next several hours, and by the time you wake up on Friday, rain will be here and be lasting through much of the day on Friday. So this is Futurecast right around 11 o'clock this evening as you're tuning back in with Topper. He'll already be tracking that leading edge of rain through areas like Woodstock, Warrenton, and Culpeper. It'll continue to overspread overnight, and by 6 o'clock tomorrow morning, raining just about everywhere. Pretty light to occasionally moderate at the start, but by lunchtime we'll start to work in some of those moderate to even heavy downpours. There is a flood watch for areas well west of I-81 over toward the Divide, but most areas the flood risk remains incredibly low. If you haven't done so already, maybe just make sure your gutters are clear or any storm drains outside of your home. Maybe there's still a little snow or ice, but if it hasn't melted already, it certainly will melt throughout the day. Tomorrow by 6 o'clock, we're still tracking rain across most of the area, so this will impact both the morning and the evening commute. But I really do think that by 8, 9 o'clock, the last of the rain is out of here and skies will be clearing quickly as well. This is 11 p.m. We'll already have some clearing conditions as we head through the overnight, and that will lead us to a pretty nice weekend with temperatures pretty mild on Saturday to kick off February. Now, when all is said and done, we are forecasting some heavier rainfall for areas along and south of I-66. That's where we're expecting at least a half an inch to up to an inch of rain. A few areas could get locally higher totals than that. The farther north you are, back into northern and western Maryland, even parts of northern Virginia, won't see as much rain, but still a pretty healthy 1/4 inch to 3/4 of an inch. Now, not only is it going to be wet, it's going to be windy. By tomorrow morning, you'll notice wind coming in from the south, gusting anywhere from 20 to 30 miles per hour. That will continue into the afternoon with some of the strongest wind down by where the heaviest rain will be. That's where we could see winds gusting maybe up to 40 miles per hour for parts of southern Maryland, parts of Fauquier, Prince William County, and then it will stay breezy as we head through Friday night, even Saturday morning. Noticeable wind with the wind shifting coming in from the north and west, gusting about 25 to 30 miles per hour as we look ahead to Saturday morning. But temperatures still mild to head into February. Will be in the low 50s in and around D.C., 40s in the suburbs, but nice sunshine for Saturday. Sunday really nice as well, just not as mild with temperatures in the 40s, which is really right around average for the start of February. But as we look ahead toward next week, a few areas could get closer to the 60-degree mark on Monday, but we don't stay that mild for that long. By Wednesday, we're back in the 40s, and our next chance for rain beyond tomorrow will be on Thursday. We'll have much more on that weather impact alert for tomorrow coming up at 4:30.
We're staying on top of breaking news, covering the deadly DCA air disaster. Thanks for joining us on the news at 4:30. I'm Larry Miller.
And I'm Simone D'Alba. Officials say there were no survivors after a U.S. Army Black Hawk helicopter crashed into an American Airlines regional jet last night over the Potomac River. The Earth camera above the National Mall capturing the collision as the plane was attempting to land at Reagan National Airport.
Right now, recovery crews are still searching the Potomac River for victims. This is a live look at boats now searching the waters. Emergency authorities switched to a recovery effort earlier this morning. They said that 28 victims have been found so far.
The National Transportation Safety Board is now leading this investigation. They wrapped up a press conference just about 30 minutes ago, and here are 3 things we know right now.
First, the NTSB's preliminary report of that crash will be made available within the next 30 days. Flight data recorders have yet to be recovered. And lastly, the NTSB says that they are considering all elements related to this crash. Now, we want to go back and listen again to the press conference by the NTSB on this investigation into this tragedy.
So they emphasize that they are still in the early phases of uncovering how this crash happened, and they won't be able to say much this early on. Take a listen.
We are all here because this is an all hands on deck event. And we're here to assure the American people that we are going to leave no stone unturned in this investigation. We are going to conduct a thorough investigation of this entire tragedy, looking at the facts. Now, with that, I want to level set. When we go to the scene, and we were here last night, we allow the responders to do their important safety mission, which in this case was search and rescue and recovery. We stand back to allow them to do their important safety mission. And so this, for us, is our first full day on scene with our entire crew coming together. We have about nearly 50 people on scene, and in addition to our resources back at headquarters in our labs and throughout the agency. So with that said, we are not going to get into specific facts in this press conference. I want to level set here. We're going to get into our investigative process. As we are able to confirm factual information, we will provide that. I do want to say this is a whole of government effort. I was able to brief, along with others, the President of the United States and the Vice President this afternoon. I want to thank them for their leadership, for their tremendous support of the NTSB, for our investigators, and for the responders that are on scene doing an important mission.
As you heard there, this is a whole of government effort as they work to figure out what exactly caused that midair collision.
There's a lot of things to consider. We're going to hear more from this presser later in the show, and are also waiting for a press conference from DC Fire that's going to start at 5 o'clock. It has been just about 24 hours since that plane first took off, and right now we wanted to bring in Jordan Fisher to help us break down the timeline here step by step in terms of how this all developed. Jordan.
Yes, Simone, we know from these major investigations, it's like a puzzle. Investigators are collecting pieces. So let's start with the first piece. 5:18 p.m., that's Central Time. American Airlines Flight 5342 takes off from Wichita, Kansas. This is a regular route. They fly it almost every single day. It heads into DCA. At 8:15 p.m., that's Eastern Time here, Flight 5342 begins descending. This is over Virginia. It's at 37,000 feet. It's cruising. You see it begin dropping on a FlightAware flight radar. It goes over Prince George's County, takes a loop. If you've flown into DCA, this is going to be very familiar to you. It's coming up from the south into the landing strip on the Potomac River. Now at 8:48, this is the critical moment, 8:48. This is when the collision happens. It collides midair with a Sikorsky UH-60 helicopter. That's a Black Hawk. And this is just 2 minutes to give you a sense of how quickly this transpired, 2 minutes after it passes over National Harbor. Now, I want to pause here for just a second. We could drill into this and go almost second by second. 8:48, you hear over the tower, radio, tower, did you see that? And even as they're trying to figure out what happened, even as they're processing what happened, you can hear the air traffic controllers redirecting planes that are coming in behind this flight, because of course this is an incredibly busy airport. They're telling people to go back up to 3,000 feet. You can hear the aircraft traffic controllers tell one pilot, take a hard right. Let's keep moving. Things begin progressing, of course. Within 10 minutes of that crash at 8:58, rescue boats are already on scene. Other rescue crews are responding as quick as they can. Within an hour, we have confirmation from the FAA. That's at 10:09 p.m. last night. FAA confirms the flight number. It confirms that it has collided with a military helicopter. Within 45 minutes, Homeland Security is on it. Newly confirmed Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem says the agency is deploying every available resource the U.S. Coast Guard has. She was out there earlier today herself. Within 10 minutes of that, there's confirmation from the American Airlines CEO. That's Robert Isom. Moving into the very early hours of this morning, investigators from the NTSB arrive on scene 12:41 a.m. in the dead of night. As the rescue operations, still at that time, were hopeful rescue operations were ongoing. Investigators from the FAA and the NTSB are arriving on scene, and they continue that work. Despite the frigid cold temperatures, as we heard Chief Meteorologist Topper Schutt say last night, that the waters at the beginning of the evening at 8:48 when this began, 42 degrees, only got colder. Nevertheless, with 7 more hours of rescue efforts until 7:45 a.m. this morning, DC Fire and EMS Chief John Donnelly tells us that they believe that there are no survivors to be found, and the search is officially being considered a rescue mission, or a recovery mission.
So Jordan, we're looking at more than about almost 9 hours plus of kind of events that transpired from when the plane first left Wichita, Kansas to the collision and then the events thereafter. What else are we missing from this timeline so far?
Right, well, I said, of course, this is a puzzle and they're collecting pieces. We heard from NTSB Chairwoman Jennifer Hamady earlier, and what she said also in that briefing is that they're going to look at the man, the machine, and the environment. If you saw that timeline we just showed you, an obvious piece is missing, one of the machines, the Black Hawk helicopter. We know very little about the flight path. We heard Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth say earlier today that it was on a routine training mission. Now, the NTSB says that, like the American Airlines plane, that Black Hawk helicopter has a recording device similar to what we know as a black box on those planes. They are looking for both of them right now. They have not recovered them yet, but I can tell you an extraordinary amount of information for those viewers who recall our coverage of the bridge collapse last year in Baltimore. Recovering the equivalent device off of that the cargo freighter told us so much about how that collision occurred, and that's what we're looking for here. That's what the NTSB is looking for, and that's really the sort of key piece in this puzzle that will help unravel this mystery.
Also, to your point, Jordan, when you think about the human factor, CBS is reporting only one air traffic control worker was managing helicopters and planes, which was likely a multiple person operation or job, or it should have been. Appreciate your insight and you shedding some light here for us. Thank you.
Well, it's times like this when our community comes together. As emergency crews continue their recovery efforts, area residents and businesses are trying to provide support as they work.
Our Lionel Donovan is in Navy Yard, where he has seen this generosity unfolding firsthand. Lionel?
Good afternoon, Larry and Simone. Well, I got a chance to speak with the fire chief of Prince George's County Fire and EMS. She tells me that agencies from across the DMV have been doing the hard work of combing through the Potomac, trying to recover as much as they can. Well, this DC restaurant chain behind me says it's been watching that work and is hoping to offer first responders some much needed relief. Glenda Moore, CEO of Silver Diner, says it's Alexandria, National Harbor, and Navy Yard locations are giving first responders meals free of charge. DeMore says he could hear the sirens when first responders arrived at the crash site last night from his home. And after learning about the collision, he felt compelled to help. The Fire Chief Tiffany Green says tracking down the debris from last night's collision is a process measured in days or even weeks. DeMore says he hopes this gesture will bring some comfort to the community he's been a part of for 35 years.
They've been working around the clock. Some of them are still there from last night and refusing to go home, wanting to just get out there and continue to work.
Provide a refuge for those first responders. So anybody who comes in uniform over the course of the day today, and we'll determine if we do something tomorrow, but it's just our honor and our privilege really to be able to provide them all a free meal.
Now, Fire Chief Green also tells me the waters around the National Harbor are being included in their search area, which is about 5 miles away from the crash site. She also says she appreciates the community's support as her teams continue their work. But for now, we're live at the Navy Yard. Lionel Donovan, WUSA 9.
All right. Of course, in times like this, we know if anything about this area is that we come together and support one another.
It's nice to just see that, to get that energy kind of going. Lionel, appreciate it. Thank you. Right now, we are joined by Charlie Pereira. He is a former NTSB investigator and transportation safety and security consultant.
Charlie, talk to us about this accident and in particular the fact that it happened at night in this airspace that has a considerable amount of traffic going in and out.
Yes, sir. I used to work there at NTSB headquarters, partially looking out over that airspace there from LaFont Plaza and walking and driving in that area. There's persistent helicopter traffic close to approaches and departures from Reagan. And while that is relatively safe during the daytime when there's good visibility, visual meteorological conditions, at nighttime your visibility is reduced, even if it was visual night conditions like we had last night. The visibility is still reduced. And if you look at the flight path of these two, the airplane was turning to the left, going almost perpendicular to the helicopter's flight path. And that would have not presented much in the way of lighting for the airplane, for the helicopter pilot to see, other than wingtip lights and strobe lights. So that, and there's already a lot of lights in the DC metro area. So it would have been probably challenging for the helicopter pilot to see the airplane from that perspective. So just in general, I think a prudent thing for the NTSB to recommend and the FAA to put into place until the investigation goes further would be to eliminate any nighttime or instrument meteorological condition flights of helicopters near Reagan Airport until that's more fully investigated and analyzed. That's my initial take on the circumstances of this accident.
I wanted to ask you just more about the NTSB process here, because I think people hear NTSB investigation and sometimes their ears turn off because it's so dense and it takes so long. And so, we heard today the GO team has been deployed. They're photo documenting the scene. They're trying to look at evidence like debris, voice recorders, air traffic control, all of this stuff that is going to come together to paint this bigger picture. What else should people know about the NTSB's process that they can kind of digest?
Well, they have a multidisciplinary, what's called GO team, and it's what they refer to as a party process. So there will be, for example, in my case, I was either group chairman of the Vehicle Performance Division or group chairman of the Vehicle Performance Group. So you have groups, and underneath each group, I would have, for example, anywhere from 2 to 10 group members that are experts in the area that we're looking into. For example, if I was doing this case, a CRJ, I might have a Bombardier engineering expert on my group. And similarly, they would have an ATC group, a pilots group called an operations group, a maintenance group, power plants group, all these different groups to look into their respective areas of expertise. So that's what's going on right now with the GO team. There's literally dozens of investigators and their group members participating in putting this together right now with what will be nightly progress meetings and media sessions after the progress meetings to educate the public on what they're finding on a nightly basis. So that's the general thing that's going to go on. Of course, they've indicated they haven't found the flight data recorder or cockpit voice recorder yet. Those are key pieces of information to help with the investigation. Should be able to hear the audio environment in the cockpit of both of the aircraft and have all of the numerical data for airspeed, pitch attitude, bank angle, position, all the hundreds, if not thousands of different quantitative parameters for the two respective aircraft. And then they'll start putting together a more refined version of the flight path. We've already seen radar plots of the flight path of the two aircraft, but those are relatively coarse compared to what is available from the flight data recorders. So that's what they'll put together. They'll start announcing their findings and we'll have a better picture of what's going on. But in the interim, the NTSB is allowed to make urgent safety recommendations to try to address preliminary safety matters. And I think, as I mentioned before, one of those that they might want to recommend to the FAA is that until this gets ferreted out better, to go ahead and stop having nighttime and instrument condition helicopter traffic in the area of Reagan Airport.
Charlie Pereira, former NTSB investigator and transportation safety and security consultant, thank you for your time. We appreciate it.
You're welcome.
You can expect more from WSA9 on this breaking news. For updates anytime, download our WSA9 mobile app right to your mobile device. You can watch us anytime for free, streaming on WUSA9 Plus. We'll be right back. Our coverage of the deadly DCA midair collision continues. We're joined now by Erica Armstrong. She's an airline and business aviation captain and pilot trainer.
Hey, it's good to be with you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Sorry to be here on a bad occasion.
Yeah, certainly. We wanted to ask you in terms of just kind of giving our viewers some deeper expertise in regard to what kind of communication goes on between air control and pilots. Can you kind of help us understand what takes place in the cockpit?
Sure. It depends on where you are. Actually, most airports in the United States are not tower-controlled airports. DCA is obviously a tower-controlled airport, and it has a special overlay of security on it, unlike any other airport in the United States. So anybody within a 30-mile radius of the DCA airport is in communication with air traffic control. What's a little bit more unusual is because there's so much military operation going on simultaneously. Tower or air traffic control is talking to the military aircraft on a different frequency. They're both in communication, but it's not necessarily the case that the pilots of a commercial airliner and the military helicopter would have heard each other. Sometimes, it's helpful for other pilots to hear where that other pilot is positioned. So it's just one little tiny element, I think, in the sequence here that added a layer of complexity to the situation. When you take the Swiss cheese model of an aircraft and aircraft accidents and you go back and you find all the mistakes, there really weren't that many mistakes in this situation. We're always trying to review and analyze so that we can not have it happen again. But most of the sequence here, the aircraft were in the right place at the right time. Even the military aircraft, helicopter, believed that he was in the right place at the right time. I think what happened is he had, when he accepted the visual responsibility of maintaining traffic separation, possibly had seen the other aircraft that was departing the area, thought that that was the aircraft that was in question, and continued to monitor that aircraft. So because this airspace is so regulated, your mindset is that you really don't have to worry about random aircraft coming into your airspace. You know, if this is flying into an airport in Las Vegas where you have a lot of sightseeing flights and helicopters buzzing around, you're much more keen to unknown aircraft. That's just not the case in this situation. So just a tragedy all around. You know, the industry is working really hard to develop the next level of traffic collision avoidance systems. Airborne collision aircraft systems is next on the slate. And it could have possibly even helped the Jeju flight with having the ability to detect objects in your flight path. You know, the problem is information overload. We don't really want it to be tracking a sparrow that's a mile away, right? So it's the next level that we're going to see in the future, and hopefully these types of incidents can be avoided altogether.
Erica, we have 30 seconds before we have to go here. Last question for you. How could things change in terms of aviation safety? How could this crash lead to safer aviation travel?
Yeah, there are very few occasions where I see AI can be used in a situation like this. So there's, you know, unless you count cards or you're a mathematician, you may not have heard the Monte Carlo process, but it's just taking just an infinite variety of situations, speeds, altitudes, momentum, plugging it into an AI consortium and predicting every possible outcome of 2 or 3 or 4 aircraft in the same airspace maneuvering to avoid each other. The problem right now is we really don't know which way a pilot is going to react. This type of system can detect slight movements within the aircraft and the aircraft around you. So, you know, this is a great opportunity to highlight that technology and the need for us to find a better way to have the aircraft itself to be able to detect other aircraft in the area.
As we try to wrap our minds around what's taken place here, this incredible tragedy, we certainly appreciate your time, your expertise. Erica Armstrong, an airline and business aviation captain and pilot trainer. All right, we'll be back after the break.
WUSA 9 Weather Impact Alert is sponsored by Morgan & Morgan.
Clouds will continue to increase this evening ahead of rain back for our Friday forecast. We have issued a weather impact alert. That rain will move in overnight while you're sleeping and last throughout much of the day on Friday. It will be moderate to even heavy at times, so you need to plan ahead now for a slow both morning and evening commute. Send the kids off to the bus stop with the rain gear. They are going to need it. If you have to spend any time outside tomorrow, you'll want the rain jacket and the umbrella. So we'll time it out here using Futurecast. This is around 11 o'clock tonight. Toppers already going to be tracking the leading edge of that rain that will continue to overspread the region overnight. By 6 o'clock, just about everyone seeing this light to occasionally moderate rain. The farther north you are, the longer you'll stay dry. We won't see as much rain for parts of northern and western Maryland, even parts of far northern Virginia. You'll see off and on showers throughout the day, but not the heavy, steady rain that we're expecting for areas along and south of I-66. This is right around lunchtime tomorrow. We'll start to mix in some of those moderate to occasionally heavy downpours, but then by 6 o'clock, that rain's going to continue to push east of 95 and will clear skies out later Friday night. By 11 o'clock, we'll already see a lot of those clouds clearing out of here, making way for a nice first weekend of February. And when all is said and done, we are expecting a pretty widespread ½ an inch to up to an inch of rain. Could see a few locally higher totals, especially where we do see some of those heavier downpours set up. The risk for flooding does remain really low. We do have a flood watch in effect for areas far west of I-81, but most areas will be just fine. If you haven't done so already, as a precaution, check your gutters, check your storm drains near your home, just to ensure they can work properly when all of that rain moves in. It's also going to be noticeably gusty throughout the day. On Friday, we'll have wind coming in from the south, gusting anywhere from 30 to 35 miles per hour. Some locally higher winds are possible, especially where we're expecting some of those heavier downpours in southern Maryland and parts of Fauquier and Prince William County. But then wind will start to diminish as we look ahead toward the weekend. Temperatures are mild to start, low 50s on Saturday, but even warmer as we look ahead toward next Monday. Could get closer to the 60-degree mark. Topper will have much more on that weather impact alert coming up at 5.
Right now on the news at 5, we continue our breaking news coverage of the deadly DCA air disaster, and we thank you for joining us again. I'm Leslie Foster.
And I'm Lorenzo Hall. So we know so far at least 28 victims have been pulled from the Potomac River after last night's crash, and officials say there are no survivors.
A U.S. Army Black Hawk helicopter collided with an American Airlines jet around 9 o'clock. The Earth cam above the National Mall caught that collision right there as the plane attempted to land at Reagan National Airport. And as you can see, an urgent search effort is still underway. Boats are canvassing the Potomac right now, and we just got an update from the National Transportation Safety Board.
Our Matthew Torres was at that news conference earlier today. And Matthew, what are investigators saying tonight?
Well, so the NTSB cannot say if this was human or technical error. It is just way too soon to even answer that. They say they want people to hold off on any speculation as far as what happened in this collision. We do know that there are about 50 NTSB members here on the scene working the investigation. And according to the U.S. Department of Transportation, Sean Duffy, there was working communication between the aircraft and air traffic control. Their flight patterns were standard. American Eagle Flight 5342 was on its final approach when it collided with the Army helicopter, which was on a training flight just before 9 o'clock last night. Duffy also said the military helicopter was aware of the passenger airplane in the area. The American Airlines CEO also saying it's unclear why the helicopter got into the plane's path. The National Transportation Safety Board has various working groups involved in this investigation. They are looking at everything from analyzing history of flights and air traffic control to the engines and hydraulic components. They have yet to find the black boxes from both aircraft. These boxes will have critical information that could help determine exactly what happened.
Our investigative team will be on scene as long as it takes in order to obtain all of the perishable evidence and all the fact-finding that is needed to bring us to a conclusion of probable cause. Our mission is to understand not just what happened, but why it happened, and to recommend changes to prevent it from happening again.
And as of this morning, crews have been able to recover 28 of the 67 victims. But of course, those numbers are only going to go up as the recovery efforts are underway. And we're hoping to get more of an update from the DC Fire and EMS. We're also being told that the NTSB is planning to speak with the families of these victims, many of whom are still trying to make their way here to DC. There's also been conversation, especially last year, just how busy DCA has been. Some lawmakers being vocal against having more flights here at the airport, including Senator Mark Warner of Virginia. We caught up with him earlier today. He says that likely is going to be a conversation to be had later, but not right now. Guys.
Yeah, right now the focus is on trying to find as many of the people whose lives were upended in that split-second moment there. And these have to be the longest minutes, hours for their loved ones.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting earlier when the NTSB said some of those family members were still trying to make their way to DC to sort of get the help they need and also process what happened over the skies last night. You know, as we mentioned, there's still a very active recovery effort happening right now in the Potomac.
Yeah, let's get over to our Melissa Kim. She's live at Gravelly Point in Arlington County, not far from the airport. Melissa, we know these rescue crews have not stopped working.
Well, guys, right now we have been here all morning and all afternoon at Gravelly Point. I just want to show you what just happened moments ago. We saw some of the recovery crews here coming out of the Potomac with scuba gear on. So they've obviously been working very, very hard in these hours of the morning and afternoon. And when they've come out with wreckage, when they've been carrying pieces of debris, they've been taking it to that little tan tent, the tan neutral colored tent over there, presumably presumably figuring out what those pieces of the wreckage are. And this obviously having an effect on all of the families who are waiting for answers, but also the people who live here as well. At Gravelly Point in Arlington, federal, state, and local officials continue to recover debris from American Airlines Flight 5342. As police boats patrol the cold waters of the Potomac River, planes roar overhead and land at Reagan National Airport, where flights resumed at 11 o'clock this morning. Kristen Clark Taylor stood and watched those planes while holding a Bible and praying.
I didn't know anyone personally, but aren't we all members of the same human race? Aren't those children there my children too, and your children too? Doesn't that make us all belong to each other.
She lives in Reston, Virginia, but like so many others whose curiosity brought them to Gravely Point, felt comfort in being near the site.
What else would I do besides get as close as I could to the souls who perished, as close as I could to the spirit of our living God, and just say prayers.
Prayers of hope as they watch rescue crews carry pieces of the wreckage.
Prayers of strength, prayers of compassion for those souls, for the country, for the world, and just to show more of that is what my prayer is for each and every American in this nation.
And our neighbor Kristen there just eloquently putting into words what I think so many people are feeling and have been feeling for this day and last night as well. And back here live now from Gravely Point, you see a light over there by the crews now. So I believe they are expecting to work well into the night again as recovery crews continue to look for answers here in the Potomac River for families who are eagerly awaiting any kind of news. But for now, we're live in Gravely Point. I'm Melissa Kim. Back to you guys in the studio.
Yeah, you're reminded here as well that this is home. This is our airport, and it could have been any of us.
And whether you knew any of the victims or not, as the woman you were talking to so eloquently put it, we all belong to someone, and this all belongs to us now. Melissa, thank you. So we're learning more about some of the victims on board the plane. Some of them were from our area.
Yeah, according to Fairfax County Public Schools, 3 of their students and 6 of their parents died in this crash. They were returning from a figure skating event in Wichita, Kansas. The district put out a statement a short time ago saying in part, quote, "Our hearts are broken as we learned that we have lost members of our FCPS family in the tragic accident at Reagan National Airport last night. I invite you to join me in praying for our families, friends, and colleagues that we know have lost loved ones in this tragic accident."
Now, some people on the plane were also former Loudoun County students, and the district also released a statement from there saying this unimaginable loss has deeply affected our community, and with great sorrow we have learned that multiple victims were former LCPS students. Many other Loudoun families have also been impacted, and we extend our deepest condolences to all of those grieving in the wake of this tragedy.
Yeah, we mentioned local figure skaters were on that plane heading back from Wichita.
Yeah, our John Duran is following up on that part of the story. John, we know you're at Ashburn, one of the rinks where those children frequented. They skated, they learned, they were coached by one of the victims too.
In Leslie, where they spent so many hours together. I spoke to some parents of young skaters heading into the rink today that knew some of the young people, and some of the victims were told as young as 11 years old. And friends of those victims are inside the Ashburn Ice House right now, spending time together where they spent so many hours on the ice together. We also watched as people brought flowers and balloons in all day, filing inside, and this is what it looks like just in the lobby of the Ashburn Ice House. A memorial has been set up and continues to grow. With the permission of her father, we spoke with a 10-year-old figure skater. She says she knew many of the victims and shared some of her favorite memories.
With Everly, my favorite memory with her was when we were sitting together and we were watching the Nationals and we were watching skaters and we were just like talking and having fun together. And my favorite memory with Lydia is when she would always help me with some things, and she would always be there to talk to me and support me. My favorite memories with Franco, I don't have a lot because I don't hang out with him a lot because he's much older than me and he's a boy. But sometimes on ice he would talk to me, and that was really fun. And my favorite memory with Riel is playing games with her and talking, and I love all these people and they really support me. And my favorite memory with my coach Ina V was when she created my program that I have right now, and she is just like, I think it's really creative and artistic and I love it.
We had a conversation this morning. At first she didn't quite understand what we were trying to tell her, and then I was a little more blunt with, you've lost friends last night.
You heard Alexis talk about her coach, Ina V. Ina is a very well-known figure skating coach in the community. Many of the skaters I talked with today and their parents knew Ina. She was supposed to be coaching today. She was coming back from a developmental camp last night. She was on that plane with some of her young skaters. And it just, I was told by a local figure skating coach that the developmental camp after those national championships in Wichita are only for some of the best in young skaters. And Alexis told us in that interview as well, just how many of them had Olympic dreams. It's just extremely tragic. And like I said, these guys are inside right now, remembering their friends and continuing to heal together.
John, if you know anything about the ice skating community, you know, as you mentioned, about time. They spend so much time together, early mornings before school, after school is over, weekends, competitions, and those coaches and the staff that were lost would have been right there with them.
Yeah, and your heart aches for these little kids. One, they're processing loss, but also this catastrophic loss as well.
Of young friends.
Exactly.
They can see themselves reflected in this loss. John, thank you for that story tonight.
Yeah, again, this is impacting so many people. We are learning that members of a Prince George's County-based labor union were also on board American Airlines Flight 5342. Steamfitters Local 602 confirms 4 of their members died in this crash.
Yeah, the union represents 5,000 journeymen, apprentices, and helpers in the D.C. region. In a statement on social media, union leaders said in part, as more information continues to come in, we are heartbroken to confirm that 4 members of UA Steamfitters Local 602 were among the victims of the American Airlines flight yesterday. The entire United Association is grateful to the first responders who worked tirelessly through the night and who will continue to investigate what happened.
Yeah, and some of the flight crew members on that American Airlines flight are also being identified tonight. This is one of the pilots right here, 28-year-old Samuel Lilly. In a Facebook post, Lily's father said, quote, "Now it hurts so bad I can't even cry myself to sleep. I know I'll see him again, but my heart is breaking." Also on board that flight, Ian Epstein. He was a 53-year-old flight attendant based out of Charlotte, North Carolina. His family says he leaves behind 2 children.
And we also know the identity of the crew chief on board the Black Hawk helicopter. This is Ryan O'Hara. Our sister station in Atlanta confirmed that news this morning. He, too, leaves behind a wife and a 1-year-old son. If you believe you may have some loved ones on board Flight 5324, American Airlines has set up a toll-free hotline. That number is 800-679-8215. Again, it's 800-679-8215. And we'll be right back.
WUSA 9 Weather Impact is sponsored by Morgan & Morgan.
All right, we want to get a check on your weather impact forecast now. The Chief Topper Shutt joining us.
Yeah, we know this is really, really important, Topper, because the recovery efforts are going to be going on throughout tomorrow, and it could be a pretty yucky day.
Yeah, it will be. I mean, it won't be cold, but look at all this rain. Back in Kentucky and Tennessee, we widened the radar out. Here we are in D.C., so the rain's going to roll in late tonight, probably either side of midnight. And again, not crazy cold, but miserable. So we're going to have a weather impact alert for all of Friday. Essentially from midnight to 6 p.m. is going to be the critical time. Impact's going to be rain and showers, and some of that rain will be heavy at times. What do you need? Well, you need just to realize your commutes are going to be slow, need your umbrella, and need something just to shed the rain and keep yourself dry. 11 o'clock tonight, rain already to Front Royal and Fredericksburg, and then boom, by 6 o'clock in the morning, rain pretty much across the metro. The darker shades of green, heavier rainfall by 9 o'clock, rain across the board by noon, temps in the 40s and 50s, and then by 3 o'clock, rain across the board, beginning to sort of taper off a little bit down toward Fredericksburg and southern Maryland. So there's our weather impact alert for tomorrow. Weekend looks pretty good. 51 on Saturday, back to the 40s on Sunday, but that is average.
So today we learned that some of the souls that died in that DCA air disaster were our neighbors from Loudoun County. And joining us right now is Virginia Congressman Suha Subramaniam.
Yeah, thank you for joining us, Congressman. I know this has been a tough journey for so many people, and we're wondering, as we really kind of explore the humanity here and kind of help people understand all that we lost, what you can share with us about any of the current or former Loudoun County residents who perished sadly in that crash.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I think this is a really tough time for the community. Certainly the ice skating community here in Leesburg and Ashburn is very close-knit, as you'd mentioned before. And, I take my kids to the Ashburn Ice House, and they love it there. They love seeing the skaters. They love trying skating themselves. They're 4 and 3. But, this is a devastating thing for our community, and certainly tragic, and something that'll stay with us for a long time. With that said, I think this is a community that also comes together in tragedy, and we'll certainly come together for these families affected.
Yeah, and Congressman, how are you doing tonight? How did you find out about what took place near Reagan National Airport last night? And I'm sure a lot of your constituents started flooding your inbox and your phone as well with their stories, wondering what was going on. How'd you learn about this?
Yeah, I actually learned about it because I was coming home from Capitol Hill. I drive into the Capitol every day to work and drive back. And I started seeing first responders on the other side of the highway go towards DC. And that's usually unusual, must mean a really big incident. And so, I got home and I found out about it and started getting texts and emails about it. I just was so thankful for our first responders, though. They did everything possible to try to see if they could save someone and salvage what was there, and we're really grateful for them.
You talked a little bit about wanting to support the families who lost loved ones tragically in this accident. What kind of support are you able to offer them at this point from your perch as a congressman?
Sure. One is just to be there for them, anything they need. Certainly, it's not just about me, it's the whole community, all the elected officials in the area. We're going to be there for them. And then second is we're going to make sure that this doesn't happen again. We're going to do everything possible. We're going to watch the investigation very closely. And we're going to try to make sure that people feel safe when they take off and land from any airport, especially one in our community.
Yeah, Congressman, so what does that look like in the meantime in terms of preventing this from happening again? What are you hearing about the possible causes and what needs to be addressed right away?
Yeah, we want to make sure we have all the facts and the whole investigation is complete. I'll say that there's been a lot of issues and a lot of people have spoken out about how busy the air traffic is in the DC area, especially out of DCA. And so, we'll keep an eye on whether that was a factor. And certainly, I'm on the oversight committee. We'll try to see if there's anything we can do, whether it's legislation or just working with our agencies to try to mitigate this. But we want people to feel safe flying, certainly, because this could have been any one of us. And we're going to do everything we can in Congress to make that happen.
You talked about the safety of our aviation system, and we know that it is quite safe, and we haven't seen anything like this, the magnitude of this in 23 plus years in this nation, and yet here we are, and there are probably some people who do have some concerns about air safety because of what we don't know yet.
Absolutely. And again, planes take off and land every day. I want people to feel like they can still get on a plane right now and that they'll feel safe. We're certainly going to look into this, but this is not a common occurrence, as you mentioned, and I want people to make sure they know that before they go on their travel.
Yeah, and Congressman, really quickly before we go, we can't forget about those first responders. We know that recovery operation is still underway on the Potomac right now. These folks who are responding, we sort of think, we know they're heroes, and we think they have these superhuman qualities, but they're human. So how are you supporting them? How can we support them through this as well?
Yeah, we had first responders in Fairfax County, Prince William County, all over the region. So maybe stop by the stations and say thank you. I know they always appreciate that. Bring a box of donuts or something. But we should always, make sure we have the funding for our first responders. It's something that I've always tried to take care of, and certainly just be thankful for all that they do, because this was a very, very difficult and complex operation.
Well, we know this is your very first term in Congress, and facing the unimaginable in these very first days of your service. We want to thank you for talking with us today, and we'll hold you to it and come back to you and talk more once we start to learn a bit more in this investigation and the role that our local congressional representatives can play in ensuring that this doesn't happen again.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right, we'll take a quick break and be right back. We're back to our coverage now of the air disaster near DCA.
Yeah, our chief investigative reporter Eric Flack has audio recordings from inside of air traffic control.
American 472 Washington, 1 star, 32017.
Oh my God,
the stunned words of someone in the background of air traffic control audio recorded as American Airlines Flight 5342 collides with a military helicopter, sending both aircraft and almost 70 people into the Potomac River.
I just saw a fireball and then it was just gone. So I haven't seen anything since they hit the river, but it was a CRJ and a helicopter that hit. I would say maybe a half-mile off the approach end of 33.
Is the airfield closed?
Yes, the airfield is closed. The airfield is closed.
Runways as well?
Yes, all runways are closed. Nobody's landing. No one's moving at all.
Ian Pachetnik is Director of Communications at Flight Radar 24, a global flight tracking service.
We're already hearing from family members who are right there at the airport waiting for their loved ones. From the data, how close was this commercial airliner to landing?
The aircraft was seconds from landing. So the collision happened at approximately 300 feet. So this is seconds from landing as they crossed the Potomac, and the runway threshold is at the river's edge. So the aircraft is very close to landing. It was on final approach. It was lined up with runway 33, and it was ready to touch down.
And yet just seconds from landing, something catastrophic happened. How?
That's a great question, and one that investigators will be looking to answer. We know that the two aircraft collided. The main question then becomes, why did they come into contact? Why were they that close together? And then, as with all safety and air accident investigations, the main goal of the accident investigation is to prevent this from ever happening again.
We are continuing our breaking news coverage of this deadly DCA air disaster. Thank you for joining us. I'm Leslie Foster.
And I'm Lorenzo Hall. Officials say there were no survivors after a U.S. Army Black Hawk helicopter crashed into an American Airlines regional jet last night over the Potomac River. We know this video is tough to watch. It's Earth cam footage above the National Mall caught the collision as that plane was attempting to land at Reagan National Airport.
Right now, recovery crews are still searching the Potomac River for victims. Here's a live look at boats searching the water. You have emergency authorities switched this to a recovery effort this morning, and they say so far 28 victims have been found.
Yeah, and the National Transportation Safety Board is now leading the investigation. Here are 3 things we know right now.
First, the NTSB's preliminary report on the crash will be available in 30 days. Flight data recorders have not yet been recovered yet. And then finally, the NTSB will look at all of the elements in the crash.
All right, one bright spot tonight. We know during these tough moments, our community really comes together. As emergency crews continue their recovery efforts, some of our neighbors and businesses are trying to provide support as they work.
Our Lionel Donovan is at Navy Yard, where he has seen this generosity firsthand. Lionel, we've got good people in our community, and when things like this happen, people spring into action.
That is correct, Leslie. In fact, today I had the chance to speak with the fire chief of Prince George's County Fire and EMS, and she says that various agencies from across the DMV have been doing the hard work of combing through the Potomac, trying to recover as much as they can. Well, this DC restaurant chain behind me tells me that it's been watching that work and is hoping to provide those first responders with some much needed relief. Glenn DeMoore, CEO of Silver Diner, says his Alexandria, Navy Yard, and National Harbor locations are giving first responders meals free of charge. DeMoore says although he lives in Alexandria, he could hear the sirens when first responders arrived at the crash site last night. And after learning about the collision, he felt compelled to help. Fire Chief Tiffany Green says tracking down the debris from last night's collision is a process that's measured in days or even weeks. DeMoore says he hopes this gesture will bring some comfort to the community that he's been a part of for 35 years.
They've been working around the clock. Some of them are still there from last night and refusing to go home, wanting to just get out there and continue to work.
Provide a refuge for those first responders. So anybody who comes in uniform over the course of the day today, and we'll determine if we do something tomorrow, but it's just our honor and our privilege really to be able to provide them all a free meal.
Now, Fire Chief Green tells me that the waters around the National Harbor are also included in the search area, which is about 5 miles away from the original crash site. She also says she appreciates community support while her teams do this work. But for now, we're live in the Navy Yard. Lionel Donovan, WUSA 9.
Chief reminding us, they said there were 3 debris fields, and how vast it is that the workers who've been doing this, the divers, the first responders that have been doing this around the clock are really working in expansive waters.
Yeah, can't stop. They just want to get this done.
We hope they get a good meal tonight for sure.
Lionel, thank you.
So let's talk about the divers who've been working in the Potomac River. Within the past hour, we spoke with the president of the DC Firefighters Association. That's the union for DC firefighters.
Yeah, he says their teams are focused solely on recovering the remains of those who lost their lives to this crash.
The challenge has been, once they've gotten inside the airplane, to be able to remove people, because it requires a lot of special tools and machinery, and these operations take time. So they're still out there now. They're not going to be, my understanding is there's not going to be any operations tonight in the nighttime hours. So when the sun goes down here shortly, I'm sure we'll be suspending operations and resuming tomorrow morning, and we'll be out here working tirelessly until the task is done.
Yeah, so they're trying to get as much done as they can before sunset. David Hoagland goes on to say tomorrow's rainy weather will be a challenge, but these teams are trained to work in those tough conditions. He also says peer support teams are in place for anyone who needs assistance.
Yeah, so first responders are dealing with some really tough conditions during that recovery mission.
Yeah, so let's bring in the chief, Top Rashut, now for some more context here. Top, we know the water was cold last night. How cold is it now, and what other factors are crews encountering out there?
Well, I mean, as you mentioned, it's going to rain all day tomorrow. It's just not going to be pleasant. Water temperature is going to stay the same. Water has a high heat capacity, doesn't fluctuate, so that's not going to stay the same. This doesn't matter so much, the air temperature. temperature, but at least it's not, in the teens and 20s like it was just last week. So temperature right now at National of 49 degrees. Winds not a factor today at all. So during the plane crash, so around 8:48, so there's what we're looking at. So we're looking at, again, water temperature, 9 o'clock, 36 degrees. Visibility, great. It was clear skies, 10 miles visibility. Winds were northwest at 15, sort of sustained. And we picked up a gust of around 26, is what we said last night. So that should not have caused, I don't think it's going to be a weather-related crash. I just don't think that's going to cause any problems. Earlier in the day, when the winds were a little stronger, perhaps as it approached runway 33. But for now, with clear skies, visibility 10 miles, that's about really all you could hope for if you were a pilot last night.
Okay. Thank you, Tom.
So a lot of people are wondering how something like this could have happened, even with all the high-tech safety measures in place. CBS News senior transportation correspondent Chris Van Cleve is giving us some more context on that part of the story.
The layers of aviation safety around an airport like Washington Reagan are numerous. You have air traffic controllers, and we know they were engaged here talking to the aircraft involved. You would also typically have something called TCAS, a collision avoidance system on board the airliner. However, below about 1,000 feet, that system doesn't alarm. Based on the way the aircraft appear to have lined up, it's likely the pilots of the airliner never saw that helicopter coming. A plane is not like your car. You can't look out the side view or rear view mirror. You can't look over your shoulder and see behind you. You have a limited field of view in that, you've got the windows, you can sort of see left and you can sort of see right, but you can't see necessarily behind you. And just a few hundred feet above the ground, those pilots' focus would be on the runway ahead of them and getting the airplane down safely. We don't know a lot about what was going on board that military helicopter. We don't know what those pilots saw or what they were looking at. It is busy airspace. It was at night, so while there was clear visibility, you are looking at basically flashing lights in the dark. And this is an arrival pattern, so there are other airplanes behind the one that they ultimately collided with. These accidents are a bit like a chain link. Several events come together in order for this accident to happen. If any one of them doesn't occur, the accident doesn't occur. The NTSB will investigate, answers will come. That will take time. For now, certainly one of the things investigators are going to look to understand is why was the helicopter operating where it was? Was it within the normal flight rules around Reagan National Airport, which is 200 feet or below for helicopter traffic? And how just did these two aircraft come together like they did remains the obvious question at this hour. Answers could take a year or more before a final NTSB report is prepared. Chris Van Cleve, CBS News, Phoenix.
In the meantime, we're getting some new information on the U.S. Army helicopter involved in this mid-air collision. Charlie D'Agata has that part of the story from the Pentagon.
Military officials told us that the Army UH Black Hawk helicopter out of Fort Belvoir, Virginia, taking part in that training flight. It's about 17 miles south of Reagan National Airport. The Black Hawk belonged to B Company, Bravo Company, 12th Aviation Battalion. Again, that has been grounded for 48 hours, an operational pause. Officials confirmed 3 soldiers were on board. None of them were senior officials, and we make that point because oftentimes these helicopters along the Potomac are tasked with transporting senior defense officials. Pete Hegseth said last night that an investigation was launched immediately by the Army and Defense Department. He also called the incident absolutely tragic.
It was a fairly experienced crew, and that was doing a required annual night evaluation. They did have night vision goggles.
Now, these helicopters are often used to transport military personnel and take part in other duties around the D.C. area. So, of course, in part of that training, they need to learn how to travel at night in congested airspace and learn the flight patterns near the airport. A law enforcement source familiar with the investigation tells CBS News investigators will examine pilot experience specifically in the D.C. airspace. Charlie D'Agata, CBS News at the Pentagon.
Now, President Trump spoke about the crash this morning, and he wasted no time blaming Democrats and their policies for what happened here.
Our Rafael Sanchez Cruz listened in on today's news conference. Rafa, the president made a lot of claims, but with no evidence.
Yeah, that's right, Lorenzo. Leslie, President Donald Trump blamed former Presidents Barack Obama and Joe Biden of undermining air traffic safety by supporting diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI over competency. Now, when the president was asked if DEI hiring played a role when it comes to the air traffic controllers or the flight crew, he backed off and said he was using, quote, common sense.
It's all under investigation. I understand that. That's why I'm trying to figure out how you can come to the conclusion right now that diversity had something to do with this crash.
Because I have common sense, okay? And unfortunately, a lot of people don't.
President Donald Trump doubling down on his analysis of what he says may have caused the air collision near DCA.
The people in the helicopter should have seen where they were going. I have helicopters. You can stop a helicopter very quickly. It had the ability to go up or down. It had the ability to turn.
The president, vice president, and secretary of defense all pointed at DEI hiring under Democratic leadership as a possible factor in Wednesday's tragedy.
We have to have our smartest people. It doesn't matter what they look like, how they speak, who they are. It matters intellect, talent.
What evidence have you seen to support these claims?
It just could have been.
It's one thing for internet pundits to spew off conspiracy theories. It's another for the President of the United States to throw out idle speculation as bodies are still being recovered and families still being notified. It just turns your stomach.
Former Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg pushed back on Trump's claims, posting on X. President Trump now oversees the military and the FAA. One of his first acts was to fire and suspend some of the key personnel who helped keep our skies safe. Trump mentioned this Fox article with the headline, FAA's diversity push includes focus on hiring people with severe intellectual and psychiatric disabilities.
And then it says FAA says people with severe disabilities are most underrepresented segment of the workforce, and they want them in, and they want them, they can be air traffic controllers. I don't think so.
Tonight, President Donald Trump signed a presidential memo that the White House says will undo the damage caused by DEI hiring when it comes to air safety. Now, this is on top of the executive order that he signed last week, instructing both the FAA and the Department of Transportation to remove any safety personnel that are deemed not competent. Outside the White House, Rafael Sanchez Cruz, WUSA 9.
Again, just a reminder, these claims have been coming without evidence.
Without evidence at all.
Making sure we button this up because we believe in telling the truth here.
And also as those bodies were still being pulled out of the Potomac, not too far away from the White House.
Absolutely. All right, you can expect more from WUSA 9 on this breaking news. For updates anytime, download the WUSA 9 app on your phone or watch us anytime on the free WUSA 9 Plus streaming app. We'll be right back. As you know, there are so many questions that need to be answered in the wake of yesterday's midair collision between a passenger jet and a Black Hawk helicopter.
Yeah, but joining us right now to share some insight is Henry Hartefeld, president of the Atmosphere Research Group and an aviation industry analyst. Henry, thank you so much for being here with us. So first up, we know you've seen the press conferences, you've seen the video of last night's disaster, you've also seen some of the wreckage. What is your understanding of what may have transpired?
Well, it appears that the helicopter may have been given an order to fly behind the PSA regional jet, the American Eagle jet, but clearly did not see the correct airplane and struck the PSA jet. It was a terrible accident, and it just illustrates how we need to re-examine the procedures and processes in place for training flights, which certainly may be necessary, but do they have to take place so close to Washington Reagan National Airport at night when visibility is reduced? I think we're going to see a lot of changes come out from this tragedy. The upside to that is it should result in much safer skies.
At Fort Belvoir, where that Black Hawk helicopter originated, I do want to ask you, though, about the controller staffing issues and whether that may have contributed in some way. There's been a lot of speculation. Obviously, the president did some speculating. Lots of people are doing speculating. We're hearing that the tower at DCA may have been understaffed last night, but then we saw something earlier today that perhaps it was at normal staffing. Can you give us some context about controllers, the role they play, and what we know about their role and what transpired yesterday?
Sure. Look, air traffic controllers are one of the key reasons why air safety is so good in the United States. And they are the ears and eyes for the skies to help pilots navigate safely, whether they are in flying or landing or taking off. It appears that there may have been a shortage of controllers last night. That may be the typical number who are on duty, but it appears that they are understaffed for whatever reason at DCA. And this is not unusual, by the way. We know that in New York City, in the metro area, they are so understaffed there, they've had to ask airlines to cut the number of flights. We have a growing number of commercial, general aviation, and military flights, and that number is going to grow even larger when electric-powered air taxis start to fly, possibly later this year. We don't have enough air traffic controllers now, and something I'm very concerned about. I understand some air traffic controllers receive those emails from the federal government saying that if they want to resign early and collect pay through September 30th, they may. We need to keep our air traffic controllers. We need to hire more, and the FAA has to step up recruitment, not thin out the ranks of air traffic controllers, because otherwise we're waiting for another disaster like this to happen.
Yeah, that's clear. We've had these close calls before, especially last year when we had these close calls at Reagan National Airport because they were short-staffed. You were about to say something about that?
Correct. And in fact, there's been roughly a 25% increase based on FAA data in the number of possible ground incursions, misses, of these ground incursions on the grounds of airports between 2013 and 2023, which was the latest data available.
All right. Henry Hartefeld, thank you so much for your insight tonight. We appreciate it.
We'll take a quick break and we'll be right back.
WUSA 9 Weather Impact is sponsored by Morgan & Morgan.
Top, we know the weather can really significantly impact the recovery effort going on right now.
Yeah, we're looking at, the sun's already down. There's just minutes left of daylight. And then tomorrow, here comes the rain. We have a weather impact alert for all of Friday. Rain right now confined to most of Kentucky, northern Tennessee, just north of Knoxville over through the Tri-Cities, and now just kind of sneaking into southwestern Virginia. This rolls in here tonight around 11, 12 o'clock, depending on where you are. So if you're going to be out late tonight for some reason, take an umbrella. So we have a weather impact alert for tomorrow, essentially the whole day. A real critical time, midnight to about 6 p.m. Most of the rain will shut off by evening tomorrow. So the impact's going to be rain and showers, heavy at times. Pretty big rain event for us. What do you need to know? Well, you need to know your commutes are going to be slow, especially tomorrow morning, miserable to bus stop, and you need an umbrella and also a light jacket or a coat to keep you dry. Not going to be crazy cold tomorrow, 40s to start and 50s during the day, but when you throw rain in there, it feels a little colder anyway. So 11 o'clock tonight, there's the line of rain, not quite to Manassas, not quite to Leesburg, but already in Front Royal, Culpeper, and Luray. Temps in the 40s, some upper 30s in Frederick and Gaithersburg, but those temps go up overnight. So by 6 a.m., now we have rain across most of the metro, low to mid 40s. Notice the arrows, that's a southerly wind, so that's a warm wind, which is why we're talking about rain and not snow. By 9 o'clock, rain across most of the metro. And look how uniform these temps are. 44 in D.C., jump the divide, and it's even 43 in Oakland. So even out there, it's going to be rain. By the time we get to midday, wow, rain. See the darker shades of green? That's moderate rain. You see the yellow, the flecks of yellow? That's heavy rain. Don't see that too often in January. So there will be some heavy downpours, especially if you're driving D.C. south on 95 to Fredericksburg. But as we mentioned, by 3 o'clock, rain begins to lift up. Still some pretty good rain up in Leesburg and also Gaithersburg. But by 6 o'clock, we have one last batch of showers as the cold front rolls through. Temperatures still tomorrow evening, 52 in Leesburg. 49 in Hagerstown. That's a pretty good deal. By 10 o'clock, everything's pretty much gone except for southern Maryland, already clearing back to the north and west, and temperatures falling into the 40s. Not going to fall precipitously behind this front by any means. Setting the stage actually for a pretty decent weekend. So rainfall potential. This hasn't changed. Not much before daybreak tomorrow, although it'll be some light rain and showers south and west. But by 11 o'clock tomorrow night, now we have anywhere from a half an inch to an inch across the entire metro area. So it's a good soaking rain across the metro, which we kind of need, actually. Wind gust forecast. Well, winds are going to be out of the south tonight, gusting maybe to 20 miles per hour. And then we get into, say, 6 o'clock tomorrow morning, winds gusting 15 to 20, a little stronger winds out in the mountains and around I-81. Front Royal could see a gust 35 to 40. And then there could be a little gust, too, around midday, especially south of town. Charles County, St. Mary's County, winds could gust 35 to 40 there as well. But no wind advisories, but it will be breezy to windy tomorrow, but it will be a warm wind. That's one reason we're going to go 55. 51 on Saturday, sunshine, mostly sunny, beautiful. And on Sunday, we're in pretty good shape. We'll say partly cloudy, a little chilly, but average, 46. Look what happens. Upper 50s Monday, around 50 Tuesday, briefly cooler on Wednesday. And Thursday, more rain with temperatures back in the upper 50s. We'll be right back after this.
Right now on the news at 5, we continue our breaking news coverage of the deadly DCA air disaster. Thank you for joining us. I'm Leslie Foster.
And I'm Lorenzo Hall. So we know right now at this hour, at least 28 victims have been pulled from the Potomac River after last night's crash, and officials say there are no survivors.
A U.S. Army Black Hawk helicopter collided with an American Airlines jet around 9 o'clock. The Earth cam above the National Mall caught this collision. You see that spark of light there as the plane tried to land at Reagan National Airport. And there is still an urgent search effort to recover the lost underway. Boats are canvassing the Potomac right now. We do know, though, as the nightfall starts to come in, it's going to sort of curtail their efforts for the night, but we'll continue to watch that. And we just got an update from the National Transportation Safety Board.
Yeah, our Matthew Torres was at that news conference earlier today. And Matthew, what are investigators saying about their work tonight?
Well, Zoe, the National Transportation Safety Board says it will stay on scene as long as they have to in order to collect all of the evidence and facts to help answer our biggest questions tonight. Exactly what happened and why. We know that they will be releasing a preliminary report within the next 30 days. A final report will follow, but that will take much longer. They will have working groups analyzing every aspect of the aircraft, from flight history to engine and hydraulics and air traffic control. American Eagle Flight 5342 collided with the military helicopter just before 9 o'clock last night. American Airlines CEO says it was the Black Hawk helicopter that got in the passenger's plane path. But that obviously is going to be something the NTSB will be investigating. There was nothing out of the ordinary as far as communication and the flight path, according to the U.S. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy. Federal officials say there will be intense scrutiny to make sure this does not happen again and to ensure people feel safe.
Safety is our expectation. Everyone who flies in American skies expects that we fly safely, that when you depart an airport, you get to your destination. That didn't happen last night.
A loss of life in an aviation accident is very unusual in the United States, and our heartfelt sorrow goes out to everyone that's affected. It affects us, it affects everyone around us. There are a lot of people hurting today. We will help find out what happened. We will do it factually, and we will do it accurately.
And as of this morning, crews were able to recover 28 of the 67 victims from the water. But of course, those numbers are only going to go up. The airport did reopen at around 11 o'clock this morning. I was able to speak with some travelers who admit there was still an ounce of fear, knowing just over the Potomac River, there was this mid-air collision, and so far there were no survivors at all. But officials stress, and we're hearing it time and time again now from lawmakers, from the Capitol down to state lawmakers as well, it is still safe to fly on a plane, but no doubt this really did shake people to their core when thinking about flying by air, guys.
I'm sure it's an eerie feeling, and they're thinking about all those family members that were lost too. That's a lot.
In terms of the NTSB and their work, we know the hardest part of their job the next couple of hours or so will be consoling the family members who are still making their way to D.C. right now. Family members of those victims. All right, Matthew, thank you. And as Les mentioned a short time ago, there's still a very active recovery effort happening on the Potomac River.
Yeah, let's get back to Melissa Kim. She's live at Gravely Point in Arlington County, not too far from the airport, where people have been stopping by to just say prayers of support for the people who are lost and the first responders doing this life-altering work.
Yeah, hey there, Leslie and Zoe. First of all, since I last saw you, the sun has obviously gone down. I can tell you it feels significantly colder than it did in the 5 o'clock hour for sure. So that is going to be an element that these recovery crews will be battling, as I want to show you the scene right now. A little bit more difficult to see, obviously, for these recovery crews as well, now that it's dark. But we did see a couple of those boats that were earlier on the river being pulled up onto shore. And if you can make out those tents there still, those tents are still up. That's where most of the wreckage has been taken when it has come out of the water. And again, as you mentioned, Leslie, people have been stopping by here all day, whether they are neighbors, they live in the area, and just feeling some humanity in all of this tragedy. At Gravely Point in Arlington, federal, state, and local officials continue to recover debris from American Airlines Flight 5342. As police boats patrol the cold waters of the Potomac River, planes roar overhead and land at Reagan National Airport, where flights resumed at 11 o'clock this morning. Kristen Clark Taylor stood and watched those planes while holding a Bible and praying.
I didn't know anyone personally, but aren't we all members of the same human race? Aren't those children there my children too, and your children too? Doesn't that make us all belong to each other?
She lives in Reston, Virginia, but like so many others whose curiosity brought them to Gravely Point, felt comfort in being near the site.
What else would I do besides get as close as I could to the souls who perished, as close as I could to the spirit of our living God, and just say prayers.
Prayers of hope as they watch rescue crews carry pieces of the wreckage.
Prayers of strength, prayers of compassion for those souls, for the country, for the world, and just to show more of that is what my prayer is for each and every American in this nation.
Back here live at Gravely Point, you see lights here. There have been more lights that have gone up in the last hour again as night has fallen and the sun has set to help these recovery crews get more of the wreckage out of the Potomac River. And I want to go back to what Kristen, the woman that I talked to in the story there, I mean, she just put into words, I think, what so many of us have been feeling in the last almost 24 hours now. Even though we didn't know these people, obviously there's some humanity involved here in that you feel compassion for these families and empathy for these families that are obviously waiting to hear about their loved ones here in the Potomac River. We are live tonight at Gravely Point. Melissa, Kim, back to you guys.
She kind of reminds us we're all interconnected.
Right.
There are no degrees of separation when it comes to this kind of tragedy.
We're all touched by this. Melissa, thank you.
We're also learning more about the victims on board that plane, and we know that some of them are from our area.
Yeah, according to Fairfax County Public Schools, 3 of their students and 6 of their parents died in this crash. They were returning from a figure skating event in Wichita, Kansas. The district put out a statement earlier today saying in part, quote, "Our hearts are broken as we learn that we have lost members of our FCPS family in that tragic accident at Reagan National Airport last night. I invite you to join me in praying for our families, friends, and colleagues that we know we have lost loved ones in this tragic accident."
Yeah, some people on that plane were also former Loudoun County students, and the district also sent out a statement saying this unimaginable loss has deeply affected our community, and with great sorrow, we've learned that multiple victims were former LCPS students. Many other Loudoun families have also been impacted, and we extend our deepest condolences to all those grieving in the wake of this tragedy.
Yeah, so we mentioned that local figure skaters were on that plane heading back from Wichita.
Our John Duran is following up on that part of the story. John, you're still in Ashburn at one of the rinks that really was so central to the young people and all of the folks that surrounded them in this ice skating community.
Yeah, Leslie, this is the Ashburn Ice House in Loudoun County. They lost multiple young skaters and one of their coaches. I've spoken to multiple parents today that were bringing their young skaters into the rink for a lesson or a skate around, and they all told me these kids spend so much time every single day on the ice together. They're like family. And I'm told the young skaters who died last night were on their way back from an exclusive developmental figure skating camp reserved for some of the best young skaters in the country. And all day we've seen people file in with handfuls of balloons and flowers, adding to this memorial that's inside and continues to grow as people are still paying their respects. And we spoke to a local figure skating coach who says he didn't know the figure skaters who were on the plane last night, but he was married to their coach, Ina Volyanskia, who was returning from Wichita with the young skaters. We're going to hear from him now, and then a young skater named Alexis who lost so many friends in this tragedy.
This woman goes, did you hear about the crash? I'm like, yeah. Did you hear about Ina? I was like, no. And then that's when I was like, oh. Just like shocked to this. Like, but it's for a lot of the kids, it's impacting a lot more because these are their friends. These are like and for me, luckily, like I say this luckily, it's like I didn't know the kids that well or at all. Whereas the coach of the kids was my ex-wife. So that's why I was like, I'm like, it's crazy, but the kids is like what breaks me up.
I love all these people and they really support me. And my favorite memory with my coach Ina V was when she created my program that I have right now. And she is just like, I think it's really creative and artistic. and I love it. I look after those people, and they were my inspiration.
10-year-old Alexis, who you just heard from, said many of the skaters she knew had dreams of making it to the Olympics, and she looked up to them. We continue to see people bring flowers inside. That's where people, friends of the people that were lost in this tragedy, the victims, are inside right now. They've been inside all day looking at that memorial, adding to it, and being together as they begin to heal after this tragedy. Leslie, Lorenzo.
It's such a tight-knit community, and you can hear that young girl talking about the friends she lost, but also the idols they lost in this very small elite group.
Yeah, and
you
think about them mentioning the dreams. You clearly think about getting older together. You're not thinking of losing your friends or losing life in this way at such a young age. All right, John, thank you so much. And we are also learning that members of a Prince George's County-based labor union were also on board Flight 5342. Steamfitters Local 602 confirms 4 of their members did die in this crash.
There's so much humanity on that plane. This union represents over 5,000 journeymen, apprentices, and helpers in the D.C. region. In a statement on social media, union leaders said, in part, as more information continues to come in, we are heartbroken to confirm that 4 members of UA Steamfitters Local 602 were among the victims of the American Airlines flight yesterday. The entire United Association is grateful to the first responders who worked tirelessly through the night and who will continue to investigate what happened.
And some of the flight crew members on that American Airlines flight are also being identified tonight. This is one of the pilots, 28-year-old Samuel Lilly. In a Facebook post, Lilly's father said, quote, "Now it hurts so bad I can't even cry myself to sleep. I know I'll see him again, but my heart is breaking." Also on board that flight, Ian Epstein. He was a 53-year-old flight attendant based out of Charlotte, North Carolina. His family says he leaves behind 2 children.
Also identified tonight, the crew chief on board the Black Hawk helicopter. This is Ryan O'Hara. Our sister station in Atlanta confirmed this news earlier today, and he leaves behind a wife and a 1-year-old son. Now, we know so many families are still making their way to our area because of this awful tragedy that occurred. If you believe that you may have loved ones that were on board the flight, American Airlines has set up a toll-free hotline. That number is 1-800-679-8215. Again, 800-679-8215. We'll be right back. Tonight, the fragility of life is on the minds of people all across our area and really America.
Yeah, and that's what made goodbyes today at Reagan National Airport even more emotional. Our Sean Martinelli takes us to the departure level where he found the heart of it.
Welcome to Reagan National Airport.
At any airport, our journeys often begin or end with a squeeze. Dozens of souls expected one yesterday. It's what makes these ones even more meaningful. today.
Well, because of the sadness that's around us because of what happened, and you want to hold on to those people that mean the most to you.
Before she set off for Boston, Mary Ellen Anderson held her sister extra tight.
My family is going to be very happy when I get on the ground. And I'll be hugging all of them.
She joined mothers and daughters, daughters and dads. At a spot where people depart, the warmth of an embrace arrived.
You know, every time you hug someone, you don't know whether that's actually the last time or not.
Today, those hugs felt different.
They do mean more today, yeah.
Because life feels fragile.
Because you don't know if you're going to see that person again, right? But nobody knows that.
If she could, Paula Roth would cling to her daughter all the way to Florida. Instead, they ended with a peck and 3 words.
Always say I love you when you leave somebody that you love. Just always say, if you hang up on the phone or you get in the car, just say I love you. It's the best thing you can do, right? 'Cause nothing's guaranteed.
Nothing's guaranteed. That's why on the day after disaster, the hugs were all the tighter. At Reagan National, Sean Martinelli, WUSA 9.
Those hugs hit different today.
Yeah, and we were talking about that last night, those final moments and what that was like for some of these folks. You know, that's all they're going to think about. That's all they're going to process. We'll be right back.
WUSA 9 Weather Impact is sponsored by Morgan & Morgan.
All right, the chief back here with us now. We're ending the week with a weather impact alert because we're going to get some rain tomorrow.
We are. Quite a bit of rain. Looks like a soaking rain for everybody.
Okay.
And, you know, right now, gets here by the morning commute and doesn't leave till the end of the evening commute.
So this is bell to bell.
Yeah, bell to bell. So get ready. Let's start with the radar. This is over the past couple of hours. We widened this out. Now, this is where all the moisture is right now. Kentucky, Ohio Valley, northern portions of Tennessee, and now it's kind of sneaking into southwestern Virginia around Roanoke. This is going to continue its march off to the east and north as we go through tonight, and we'll show you a futurecast in a second. We have a few more hours of dry conditions, but if you're out late tonight, you're going to have some rain. So, weather impact alert for tomorrow. The when is going to be midnight to 6 p.m. The impact, well, rain and showers, and at times, some of the rain will be heavy. What do you need to know? Well, both commutes are going to be slow. It's going to be miserable at the bus stop tomorrow with rain and temps in the 40s, so you need your umbrella and some kind of light jacket or coat that will keep you dry. So here's what I mean. By 11 o'clock tonight, still dry in the metro, but, you know, we have showers and rain, Front Royal, Winchester, back toward Culpeper and Fredericksburg. It spreads out over the entire metro pretty much by daybreak, so temperatures in the low 40s. So while we're going 50s tomorrow, it will be kind of chilly early in the morning at the bus stop. So rainy and low 40s is no picnic. By 9 o'clock, we're still in the mid 40s with rain across the board. Then the rain gets even heavier by lunchtime. Look at the flecks of yellow. That's heavy rainfall. Don't see that too often in January. And temperatures, they're going up, but not crazy, you know, up in the upper 40s now. Finally around 50 at 3 o'clock. Notice the rain began to pull off to the north for the time being. Notice the arrows are still out of the southwest. That's a warm flow. By the time we get to 6 o'clock, more rain and showers just in time to end the commute. Temperatures still either side of 50, so it will be a fairly mild day, but by 10 o'clock, now the rain and showers clearing southern Maryland, and already skies clearing west of Leesburg and along I-81. And temperatures still not that cold, 50 downtown, mid-40s in the suburbs. That's actually pretty good. So how much rain? Well, by daybreak, not much, hundredths of an inch. But as we go through 11:30 tomorrow evening, almost an inch to half an inch, pretty much across the board. This is a little bit less than we showed you yesterday, and I think it's running a little bit light. I think we're going to have generally an inch of rain across most of the metro before all is said and done. So, winds. Look at these winds out of the south. They could gust to 20 miles per hour tonight. No wind advisories or alerts or anything. By tomorrow morning, could see some stronger gusts along I-81, kind of between Winchester and also Luray. Winds in the metro, 10, 15, maybe 20 miles an hour. Maybe some stronger gusts out of the south-southwest just before lunchtime. 31 mile per hour wind gust in Leesburg, Manassas, and 38 mile per hour wind gust in La Plata. Again, these numbers are miles per hour at a snapshot in time. By this time tomorrow evening, winds gusting in the 25 to 30 range, but across the divide, gusting again over 40 miles per hour. And then midnight, by the time we get to that, winds will be gusting again over 30 miles per hour across most of the metro. So, weather impact alert tomorrow for rain. 55, nice on Saturday, 51, and really nice on Sunday too, partly cloudy, 46. That's average for this time of year, so that's not so bad. And looking ahead, there's no Arctic air in sight for a while. If you were tired of our cold January, here you go. Upper 50s Monday, 50 Tuesday, briefly chilly on Wednesday, back to the upper 50s on Thursday, and next Thursday that will be our next chance for some more rain.
All right, Tom, thank you. Right now, let's see what's coming up on the CBS Evening News.
Yeah, John Dickerson and Maurice Dubois have a preview.
Investigators are gathering clues at the site of the midair collision just beyond Reagan National Airport.
Some travelers we spoke to today were apprehensive. So what are the risks? Our Eye on America tonight looks at the safety of the skies on the CBS Evening News.
right, take us on out of here, Top.
Okay, so weather impact alert tomorrow. Rain pretty much, as you said, bell to bell. I like that. So get ready. And then, you know, a nice weekend. We go into February, 51 degrees and sunshine. That's not my idea for start of February, but okay. Mid-40s on Sunday, upper 50s next Monday. Briefly cooler Tuesday, Wednesday. Next chance of rain kind of bookends here will be Thursday. But look at that. We're back in the upper 50s next Thursday.
But this is not just nuisance rain. This is significant rain.
This is significant rain. Pretty much rain across the board and a soaking rain.
Okay, we got it. Thank you, Todd. Thank you for being here with us at 6. The CBS Evening News is next.
We'll see you back here at 11. Have a great evening.
WUSA 9 Weather Impact is sponsored by Morgan & Morgan.
And I'm WUSA 9 meteorologist Topper Shutt. Well, rain's going to return, and it's going to be a pretty soaking rain across the entire metro. So we have a weather impact alert Friday, you know, essentially midnight to 6 p.m. The impact's going to be rain and showers, and at times the rain is going to be moderate to heavy. So what do you need? Well, you need to, you know, slow down. Commutes are going to be slow.